joint meeting, I have to call my meeting to order too, because we have a quorum.
Oh, okay. Well, you better call your meeting to order then. I didn't know you had a quorum. You only had people.
We have 2 out of 3. That's a quorum.
Oh, it is? Okay.
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 7:07 on April 5th, and I am calling the Joint Water Commission Capital Budget Committee meeting to order. Do I have a second?
Second, Steve Girardi.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's Steve Girardi and Lee Jenkins. So we are in order now.
Well, I guess I should have called for a vote, which I haven't, but I will move that we call the Capital Budget Water Commission meeting to order. Do I have a second?
I second.
Roll call vote. Sam Wakeman, aye. Mike, Brian Host,
Aye.
Mike Dick,
Aye.
Susan Franklin,
Aye.
Ralph Dormitzer,
Aye.
Francine Lyons.
Aye.
Okay, I think we're underway. Lee, we got a nice projection of your capital projects, which is very helpful to understand what you're thinking about doing. And one of the things that I find missing is a Water Commission financial projection to understand how the Water Commission is going to pay for all of this.
Okay, I will turn that over to Jason because he's been working on this in the rate study. And
Okay,
it's supposed to be in the rate study how we're paying for it.
Yeah, so we did a rate analysis, given projections, and at this annual town meeting, we're looking at a across the board 2.5% increase on charges, as well as adding a third tier usage charge for high residential customers. Given those projected increases, we're able to cover the entirety of that capital plan.
are you financing this or are you paying cash for it?
We are doing a combination of both.
Can you send us an outline of your proposed expenditures in cash and bonding?
As we go through, we are going to pay cash when available. So like this year, we're looking at spending
Jason, you just muted.
Yeah, Jason, you hit mute.
We didn't hear it.
I was scrolling through my slides. This year, we're estimating approximately $600,000 of non-borrowed expenses and 3.5 million of borrowed expenses. Those borrowed expenses, the majority of them is the GAC, granular activated carbon construction. We are going to put forward for that for grant and SRF funding, which is state revolving fund, which is historically almost, if you get the program, you get a 2.5% interest borrowing. If in times of economic hardship in the past, they have gone down to 0% and or principal forgiveness at times. So we're hoping that there may be some opportunity for that this year. And that's why we're targeting this project, given its size and scope for that process.
And you're still okay if you don't get the grant. Is that correct?
We budgeted for standard borrowing of 4%. All borrowing in the plan assumes a 4% interest rate.
And between your I call it a cash expenditure, and your debt service, does that leave a transfer into your reserve at the end of the year that you're projecting?
This year, in the projected, those expenditures would leave about $15,000 left in that transfer line to capital if we expended all of that $600,000.
Yeah, okay. So you're cutting it pretty thin.
But we still have a retained earnings of 1.3 million before this year is closed.
Yeah, but
And that doesn't touch that number.
we don't want to strip that out. Any members of capital budget have any questions?
Well, I guess.
Jason, I guess the one question I have is, what happens if you don't get a positive vote on the rate increase?
We will strip back the capital expenditures for this year. Most likely the GAC construction would definitely be put on hold, as that's not only a large upfront cost, but a large operational cost to the department as well. So without that increase, we would hold off on that. We may move forward with the design to still try to put it in for grant funding to make sure that we don't lose the opportunity given the potential stimulus monies being put into infrastructure projects.
What happens if you don't get the rate increase and you can't do these projects?
Well, the GAC is critical as far as water quality is concerned.
I understand.
I mean, at some point we're going to have to do it. I mean, or we're going to be sending out flyers to the town saying, "Don't drink the water; it'll give you cancer." We are currently trending up significantly on. We're not trending up significantly. We're trending on the upward on THMs, which are disinfection byproducts. So the GAC will eliminate those disinfection byproducts. It also removes the PFAS, which was the issue that we ran into at Elms Meadow. That well site's offline now due to those PFAS contamination. So the GAC would eliminate both of those contaminants. And the goal is obviously the mailing that you all receive. We don't want that mailing to go out and not say that the source is offline. So that's the goal in implementing the GAC project.
So it comes down to passing this third tier at town meeting. Have you explored alternatives to your particular proposal on the tier 3 and the rate you're asking for? Is there an opportunity to balance out the rate increase across the 2 tiers and not go to a third tier?
We did look at going to 3, just keeping the existing 2 tiers. And if we kept the existing 2 tiers, it was a significant rate increase for all customers across the board. So you were looking at like 10%. It was like 10, don't quote me, it was like 10, 7, 5, 5, 2.5.
Right.
And the other piece for the that tier 3 is state regulators require us to maintain a 65 gallons per capita per day for the town. We currently are at 67. We're up to 67 this year. We're typically at 65. That tier 3 would be at 100 gallons per capita per day. So those are people that are already using a significantly more water than they need to use for regular life in your house. It's typically just irrigation. So anybody that's going to be in third tier are going to be people who are using irrigation. Even people home with COVID, typically we're not getting into the third tier. They're getting further into tier 2 and what would be still tier 2. It's the people that are irrigating their lawns that are going to hit tier 3. So you have the opportunity not to go into tier 3 if you don't want to.
But you may get a turnout at town meeting for people who do irrigate their lawns and don't want a rate increase, whatever the.
I agree.
So I'm trying to measure the level of risk, Jason, on losing on that vote. And on your financing, on the bonding, is that 20 or 30 years?
20-year.
So is there any wisdom in going to a 30-year and trying to get the overall annual number down, even though the interest paid would be much higher?
That's a question for Don. We did not look at that, though.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And
Okay.
the SRF program is limited to 20 years. The program is, just so you understand, that it's a revolving fund because it was basically created, and they continue to fund other projects with the pays from the previous projects. So it's a revolving process. So you have 20 years. They budget the whole program on a 20-year basis.
So that's really the reason for going to 20, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's good. That's all good information to know, especially for someone at town meeting to weigh the pros and cons. Thanks.
Ralph, did you have some questions?
Sure. A few, actually. Are you changing the tiers? In other words, is the second tier at 2,000 cubic feet? Same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So people.
So 0 to 2,000, 2,000 to 5,000, 5,000 and above.
Okay, so that's where your tier is going to work.
Yeah.
Are your tiers, that is your increase going to go up every year for the next 5 years to get to 12.5%?
Yes.
Okay. So the core question for me has been, how should you really fund capital? Because what you're really building in is a long-term expense associated with was primarily capital, but not necessarily operating expense. How can you justify actually going after that amount of increase over 5 years, where in fact you're really just simply sponsoring new capital expenditures at this time?
Yeah, you are correct. The majority of this increase is due to capital expenditures. And
Should you really increase your capital charge?
we are not calling it a capital charge anymore. It's called the base fee, because
I
it's the base
understand that,
fee of
but
service.
you've had a capital charge. Should you now just increase the capital charge instead of the water rate?
The problem is people were sold the bill of goods back in the day that the capital fee would go away. And that would be only if you assume there's not going to be any other work ever done on the system in your lifetime.
No.
And that's obviously not the case. Everything continues to deteriorate over time. We have 100-year-old pipes, significant numbers of 100-year-old pipes in the system still to this day. So
I agree with you, Jason. I thought saying that the capital charge would go away was one of the stupidest things that was ever said, because it's going to be continual. You're going to have to continually upgrade your services. Yes,
that's why
Lee.
I'm glad I didn't say anything. I didn't say that, so.
Yes, Lee?
Okay, one thing we have to remember, I hate to bring up history, but in 2013, we lowered our water rate 10%. And don't forget, at the same time, sewer was going up 10% every 4 years. And we lowered it, and we never went up since then. And DOR recommendations are to increase your utility rate 2.5% a year to keep up with inflation. So just keep that in mind, that we have never done that in the last 8 years.
Understand.
Yeah, I'm just putting in a little bit of history here to.
Yeah, I know.
It still comes back to how do you really treat capital? And you're really building in expense rather than capital is where you're doing it. And the other thing that strikes me is, I think if I read your materials, you're actually going to increase your actual expense as a result of this, I believe, this activated carbon system by $300,000 a year. So you are really coming up with not only huge capital costs, but also operating costs as a result of what you're doing. Is this really the right thing to do at this time? Are there some other options? And in fact, you have not exceeded any of these requirements so far. You've still got room to go. And you only have one reading from your wells that in fact exceeds the current state requirements. So it looks as though this is a lot of money coming in very early on this thing.
Well, THMs are ever growing. I agree. PFAS is a new requirement, and we're nowhere near the number at Lily Pond. But I don't want to minimize that. But the THMs are basically a byproduct of the treatment process as we have it today. And as the water quality has been decreasing, deteriorating over time, that production of THMs has increased over time. So basically, you have a higher organic loading in the reservoirs. That higher organic loading level, we can only remove a certain percentage given the process we have. So the only way to do it is basically the GAC is a giant Brita filter for the entire water treatment plant. We have looked at other alternatives. Resin was evaluated, not pilot. Actually, there was a lot of piloting done in the past. So the most recent round of study, we first took a look at all the different alternatives that were evaluated for THM reductions, and GAC was the best bang for our buck. And I know it's an expensive operating cost, but it's the fear is, I agree, Ralph, we're not there yet on the THMs, but I don't want to be in this seat if we have an issue, because you're going to get that brochure that went out to everybody. Instead of it saying that the source is offline, it's going to be saying the source is still pumping water to your house and don't drink the water. And I don't want to get there personally. I mean, that's just a nightmare scenario for us at the water department.
Yes, Lee?
Okay, now Jason brought up about the TTHM. This is when we started the pilot study with the GAC. Since that time, this other PFAS came up, which we were not expecting. So we did discover that the GAC removes the PFAS. And in the last 2 weeks, we got a letter from the Mass Department of Agriculture asking if we would start testing for glyphosate. So that might be something else coming down the road that, oh gee, we had no idea that we might have to be removing another invasive from our plant. And this is something that people put on their lawns. And we have been having problems, as you know, especially in the well field, where we have not for the last 10 years been able to dissuade people from putting materials in the lawns that are contaminants. So, we have to be prepared and, hope that maybe this GAC will also take out this latest chemical that we're being asked to look at.
Sam, I have another question.
Yes, Michael.
Two questions unrelated. The first question goes to the GAC and the sludge ponds. From my minimal understanding, the sludge ponds are there to remove manganese and are not related to the TTHMs or the PFAS. Am I correct? Or
No, totally. The sludge ponds are a byproduct of all the process. So every process creates a precipitant and or filtered out materials. Those get backwashed and put into the sludge lagoons. So the sludge lagoons are basically, they have more aluminum than anything else in them, but they're basically organic matter.
Okay, so that doesn't change.
Chemicals.
My next question relates to Ralph's line of questioning, and it's a question that I'm new on this board, and I'm not entirely confident in my understanding of the mechanics between water and sewer as enterprise funds and the town budget itself. So here's my question. Can the town, as part of a capital improvement plan, provide funds to the water department towards the GAC, even if it means reducing funding to other needs that the town might have?
Well,
that has been done. The example is Bound Brook Dam. Bound Brook Dam is a water department asset, and town funds were used to repair Bound Brook Dam.
So where my line of thinking is going is so that the town can deal with pathogens known and potentially future. To me, it makes sense to help the water department get the water department on a footing where it can deal with these critical contaminants that must be dealt with. So I just want to put that notion on the table for this committee, that perhaps in looking at the amount of money we happen to have in the capital stabilization fund, perhaps we should consider allocating something towards the GAC so that we can get this project underway. It seems like this is something this water department need is urgent. Or, that's my take on what I've heard tonight.
One concern I have in looking at your capital expenditure projection is that you are adding and adding and adding to your debt service yearly out into the future. And the existing debt service isn't dropping off that quickly.
It does have a big cliff in 10 years. There is a big drop off 10 years out, and that's why we capped the plan has always been capped at 5 years. But if you look at year 5, it was going to be 0% increase. And I mean, you don't want to talk about decreases 5 years away, but there is a potential that we turn the corner on debt at that point. But we do have the looming capital improvements plan that is to be completed this spring finally for the treatment plant as a whole. The good news is the initial evaluation said the plant is actually in good structural condition and is operated well and maintained well. So that's the good news of it. And we have additional run hour capacity of the plant. We operate now on a 12 to 16 hour day. So we still do have capacity left in the plant, even given its existing configuration for future years. And the GAC basically as a polishing filter will allow better capability to maintain water quality too. But that looms out there as to that plan may plug in some numbers into that capital expenditure spreadsheet that are. And the other one too is we did get the $300,000 for the lagoons last year. We haven't yet started those because of the fact we only last month finally got the analysis that USGS and the EPA had done 2 years ago. So there might be a more than $300,000 expenditure out there given the requirements they may be putting on our lagoon discharge in the near future. That was unexpected. We were expecting to be able to just expand. We may have to do more than just expand at this point.
Okay. Lee?
Okay, part of this conversation feels like deja vu to me when we had our last rate study, because if you remember in the last rate study that there were a lot of capital projects that were supposed to be bonded, but we have been extremely lucky in how we have been doing our finances. And we've been doing, several different things, like we insulated the well field, so we were getting 15% of the water at 60% of the cost for the last 6 years, which gave us a little more wiggle room. So in the last 6 years, the only capital project that we went out for minimum bonding was the water tank behind the high school for $250,000. So as to, Jason is very conservative in his planning. And of course, he put in a lot of bonding in this rate study, which we may not need as to our projects coming along, as we may be getting more in from different areas. We don't know, because there are, always the questions of how much you're going to be getting in from water, what's going to be liens, what's going to be system development. So we have a lot of questionable items in our budget that we have no clue where they're going to come in. And that has been good for us in a way, because it has given us a little extra in order to get the projects done, as I said, without the bonding.
When you assuming this rate increase goes through, and you project it out for the next, say, 10 years, along with your capital plan, are you going to be able to afford all of that? I'm assuming a lot of the capital plan is going to revolve around debt service. So it's a concern that if the Water Commission cannot come up with a balanced budget, then the town has to step in and bail you out, so to speak, which did happen probably 15 years ago.
If Michelle will let me share my screen for a second, I can show you a brief snapshot of the rate study that we presented to the selectmen. Hold on. So this is the projected existing debt in gray, the operating expenses in blue, and the proposed capital expenditures in black, and the green is our projected revenue with the 2.5% increases. So all of that was included and covered. There are some times when you may see a small delta above. That would be a assumed expenditure from retained earnings to cover that capital cost. So that's just the. So to your question, Sam, our rates cover all in costs, both the existing debt, the operations and maintenance, the projected operations and maintenance, and the projected expenditures and capital.
Yeah, but their capital expenditures, is that the additional debt service?
Yes.
Included within that, along
Yes.
with cash?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
I'm
the
just trying
entire.
to understand this.
Yeah, so that's the entirety of the debt, both. I mean, that's the entirety of the capital expenditures, both the cash payments and the new debt.
Okay.
But to Lee's point, we're going to spend when available cash for as much as we can. But
Yeah.
for simplicity's sake, we showed borrowing all of it because, like we said, you get a fluctuation, and to assume we're going to have that much, we didn't want to make. We wanted to be the most conservative in the assumptions.
Okay. Can you send that to us, Jason?
Sure. I can send the rate study presentation.
That'd be great. Then everybody would have it.
I could bore you
Yes,
with it if
Lee.
you want.
Okay, well, two other bright spots that may come along, we don't know, because we are the only place in the area that has water, because you remember we are selling water to Hingham for Linden Ponds. Well, A.W. Perry has contacted us in the last 2 years because they're looking to do a project along the Route 3 corridor in Hingham. And then Toll Brothers in Situate is looking to do a 40B project on Route 3A. And both of them are sending out feelers to us about purchasing water from us like Linden Ponds is doing in Hingham, because the surrounding towns, as you know, do not have sufficient water. We're the only town that does not go into mandatory restriction anywhere from April 15th through October 1st, because our town fathers were really good in building the reservoir back in the 70s. So this may be something that could be coming down the road to inject a little more income into our coffers to help relieve some of the stress with the projects going on.
Okay.
Who negotiates those deals?
What was your question, Michael?
Who from either the town or the water department is the lead negotiator on dealing with Toll Brothers or, I'm sorry.
A.W. Perry?
Yes. Who negotiates? Who gets us the best deal for our water to make the impact on these capital improvement projects minimal and give those outside consumers the higher rates rather than ourselves?
I would assume that negotiation would be done starting with Chris Senior down from there. It's not, it would not, that would be the assumption is that how it would actually happen. The first brush is they need to come to us, tell us how much water they need, and we have to determine if we have enough water to supply them. That's step one in the process. We haven't even gotten to step one. So
I see. Okay,
that's the first piece. What are your needs? Can we provide them? Now let's start the talks about what happens next. But we haven't even gotten to, we need X gallons per day per year.
when do you think that'll happen?
It came up in a discussion about regional sewer about a month ago, I would say, and we had it in our last water commission meeting. The commission was interested. Brian went back and told the DPW director, and he was going to bring it to Toll Brothers. We haven't heard back from that. So in the end, they would be running a pipe from basically the end of our pipe on Route 3A to where the Situate fire station is where their proposed development is. So they would eat that entire cost on their dime, and then, but we need to know what the actual usage is first.
Right. So I would hope that someone, and Lee, I don't know if that's you, would be able to influence the negotiations to get us the top dollar for that water.
No, that is above my pay grade, but I just wanted to tell you guys that A.W. Perry has to go for a zoning change in Hingham before they can proceed on their project.
Yeah, and a 40B
They've been
is
working on-
always a difficult sell, no question.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that this might be something coming out in the future to help us out. Just so you're aware to come.
The biggest issue we have with any of them is summer use. So I know that when Toll Brothers reached out in Situate, they wanted for irrigation too, and that's probably going to be a no-go from us on our side, because that's when we don't have the water. So that'll be part of the negotiation, though, is what that means to us at the plant itself as well.
Thanks.
You know, Jason and Lee, I'd be very concerned about this conversation. This entire plant, including the Aaron River Reservoir, has been paid for by the town of Cohasset. Last year, we had a serious drought, and we did have mandatory restrictions. There is no telling where we're going next year, this year, next year, the year after that. The first responsibility of any officer in this town, including all of you, is to make sure the town of Cohasset has water. We have paid for this entire infrastructure. We're continuing to pay for it. And it seems to me very, very risky, based on what had happened last year, that in fact we could run into a drought where others were drawing on our water and demanding water, where in fact the town of Cohasset has paid for this entire infrastructure, with the exception of what has been paid for by Linden Ponds. So I really have serious reservations about what you do. I understand why you want to do it. I understand you want to offset costs, and I don't doubt that that's a good idea, but be extremely cautious about denying anything of the people of Cohasset the water they have paid for and are still paying for.
Thanks, Ralph. Yes, Lee?
Okay, Ralph, remember 5 years ago when there was a severe drought, we were hooked up to Situate to sell them water. And our restrictions are based on rainfall, according to our permit, with about average rainfall. Situate was within 5 days of running out of water, and we were in the exact same restriction as Situate, and we had 350 days worth of water. And you have to be careful about the state, because there's 65 gallons per person per use. They came to us, and as a matter of fact, a member of the advisory board was at that meeting, where they said, well, we did a 10-year study, and we decided that we didn't want the towns that didn't have water to feel bad. So we are restricting you to only 65 gallons per day per person. And we want your water to go to the ocean for the fish and to raise your prices for your customers. And we do have water that is overflowing a lot of times because, according to our permit, we are restricted in what we can use. And our customers are not happy about that, but this is the state.
But to your point, Ralph, we are being very cognizant of availability of water. And and my biggest concern with all the discussions, and we're doing a big push on the CIP too, on capacity of the plant and the ponds. And like I said, the irrigation water at any sale is going to be a no-go. As far as the water department's concerned, having somebody that wants a steady state 365 days a year is a good customer for an outside of the town. Somebody who wants peak water when we need it is not a good customer for the water department.
Right. Out of curiosity, and this is more of a technical question, most of the organic material is coming out of Lily Pond. It has gotten worse and worse over the years, as we all know. Is there any chance that the water coming in from Aaron River Reservoir before it reaches Lily Pond is really actually less loaded with organic material? Are you getting it still huge quantities of organic material as a result of the Aaron River Reservoir?
Aaron River Reservoir is actually a pretty tannic pond.
Okay.
So all of the tributaries to that pond are coming out of bogs in Norwell, in Hingham.
Okay.
So it's pretty tannic up there. But they, a lot of the increase as of late, I believe, is from, you can see in our rainy years is when the water's the worst. So it's flushing out of wetlands.
Yep.
I had this discussion with the Board of Health. We have flushing out of wetlands that are adjacent to septic. The wetlands are awesome at killing the nutrients of wastewater, but they're awful at creating organic matter.
Okay.
So when you get these rainfall flushes, they flush through those wetlands and create huge surges of organics at Lily Pond.
I see.
So our worst years are when it rains, and our worst water quality is when it rains.
Okay.
So we are actually, I'm going to bring it to the board hopefully at the next meeting. We're looking at hiring a person who's an expert in pond limnology to look at the pond as well. We found last year, both myself and Fred had some concerns, who's the head at Woodard, about algae bloom or algae in the water, because there's a lot of complaints we get about taste and odor. And so we wanted to do a study to see. We took only one sample so it's not super scientific, but we did find some algae in the pond. So there's an opportunity there to potentially to treat that as well, and eliminate that organic matter in the pond. But then that's a ongoing maintenance question as well. So we want to get somebody in here to look at the pond. And part of that too is that that study that was done showed we have a really low pH, and that's what's driving our new discharge permit from the lagoons. So we want that person to come in and look at the pond holistically too, and see if there's some issue that is causing our pH to be so much significantly lower than even in Weymouth, where Weymouth had the same study done. I mean, I know every pond is different and whatnot, but they had a discharge permit, let's just say in the thousands, and ours was in the 50s. So why is ours so significantly different? So we wanted to get a handle on that and what the causes are. So we're hoping to get this person on board to study the pond and let us know what our actual issues with the pond itself are. And is there
I think that's a great idea. I think there's some issues about, why is the pond so stagnant? Why can't you flush more? All of that makes sense to me. That's exactly right. Totally agree. Yep.
Okay, there was one thing I noticed. I happened to be watching the 2020 CSCR State of the Harbor study, and they were tracing Down Brook all the way up through Beechwood. And it was a massive rise in optical brighteners all along their testing in Beechwood and Bound Brook, all the way through into the harbor. And optical brighteners, we know, come from septics and washing machines. So this is something that kind of caught my eye that we maybe should be looking into a little more, because there are a lot of areas there that are still not up to code, shall we say. And we have talked about sewering the Beechwood area several times, but that hasn't really picked up any steam.
Does anybody on Capitol have any more questions?
I do, Sam, just a few. I just want to circle back to, and maybe this is just fiction in my head, but I want to circle back to the idea of, what happens if you don't get your rate study or your rate increase. Specifically, I mean, will the warrant article like have the GAC system, for example, the capital approval of that contingent upon, another article that is the rate vote? I mean, how does this get structured?
I'm not positive we've even come to grips with it. Don and I were talking about that today as to
Okay.
what that means.
Okay.
The goal, and honestly, and this is we need to discuss it internally as well, is if we do want to try and apply for that grant,
Yep.
it needs to have, I get a lot more points for the grant if the funding is authorized, even if it's not, even if we don't have the money to cover it in the budget by having the rate increase. It's
Okay.
almost a hindrance not to do it because we won't actually borrow the money if we don't have the money to pay for it. But by having the authorization allows us to apply, and then we can go back in the fall and ask for something to do with it associated if we needed to. We haven't decided. I'm just going to leave it at that
Okay.
at this point.
So, well, this leads to my next question, which is, do you have the flexibility to stagger out some of the, the future capital spend items? Like, for example, let's just say you didn't get your rate study, your rate increase approved, but you wanted an appropriation for the GAC system. Could you go ahead and bond that and just push out, the Beechwood, water main in fiscal 2023, push that out to 2024 to create space?
The 2023 is when that's Route 3A is being paved by the state. So
Got
we're
it.
on the tip for that. That's the one that can't move, honestly.
Beechwood is.
Beechwood. The other ones
Okay,
are all
but
in
you could
Brian's
maybe move
paving
Summer or
plan.
Atlantic or one of the
Yes.
others.
So
Okay.
we would bump those, yes. Sam and Ralph would be mad, but we bump Atlantic
Well,
out.
you push it a year, you don't push it a decade.
I know.
But in the GAC system, am I accurate that, that's so important that has to get done like right away? Is that the right way to think about it?
It needs to get done right away for the fear of if we don't and something happens.
Okay.
That's my
Okay.
fear.
So we have to do it. And if we don't get the rate increase, which may just be, me seeing ghosts, but if we don't get the rate increase, we can make room for this in the capital plan other ways. We can go ahead, do
Potentially,
it,
yes.
bond it, and push other things out. Okay. I just want to understand the moving pieces here.
Well,
And
the
if we
other piece
get-
too is if we ever get the 2.5%, it makes that debt schedule look a lot different as well.
Right.
As far as how much we're borrowing and how much we're paying on the debt.
Okay. And if we get any grants, they would be used to reduce the amount of debt that we've taken on as opposed to doing new things. Is that correct?
What did you say?
If we get any grants, they would be used to reduce the amount of debt being taken on as opposed to just freeing that money up to go do something else.
No, it would be if there's a couple options there when you do SRF. It's either you get principal forgiveness. Yes, it would be put towards that. You would get 2% or 0% loan.
Yeah.
And the other piece
Okay.
that the other piece of the GAC though is the operations and maintenance too. So without that, without the increase in not year one but year two, that need is there for the actual operations and maintenance of the system.
Okay. Obviously, just keep in mind 0% or 2% loans are still debt. They're not
I know.
grants. It's just a very minor stuff. Okay. And then two really long-term questions. When is sort of like the really big spend at the water plant coming? I don't think I see this on the 10-year plan.
We took it off based on the capital improvements plan, saying that that this plant's in pretty good condition at this point. So we do still have it in year 9. I think there's an $8 million upgrade. Hold on.
I don't see it.
In
It's in the-
2030, you have about $1 million reduction in debt service.
I don't have the rate. I don't have the entire rate study in front of me right now.
But in
so
terms of like a $30 or $40 million plant replacement number, I'm not seeing anything like that.
we're not
here.
carrying that anymore.
Okay, so that's no time soon is what you're telling me.
No time soon.
Not in the next decade.
At-
Okay,
at-
which may obviate my last question, which is, based on the flyers that you guys mailed, it sounds like, we have fairly high operating costs associated with the water coming from the reservoir because it's surface water,
Yeah.
which kind of begged the question, should we be looking at investing in some, major well fields somewhere on the west side of town?
I actually reached out to our consultant last week about that specifically. I said, we own a lot of land to the right of the water department that was purchased, and that's the big elephant in the room expenditure that's still on the debt schedule. And is there any way we could make use of that with water supply, be it a well, either a superficial well or a bedrock well? Even if it's a small capacity well, it could help supplement and offset that loss of Elms Meadow. We haven't eliminated that option. It's on the
Okay.
list of things to think about in the future.
That's it for me.
Anybody else have any further questions?
I
This
have,
has been very enlightening.
I
Thank
have,
you.
I do have one comment, Sam. Yeah, I don't know if you can
Yes,
hear me.
Francine.
Well, to Brian's question, I don't know if I'm looking at an outdated 10-year capital plan, but I do see a $24 million expenditure in 2029.
Yeah, that got removed in the most
Okay.
recent one, I believe.
Okay, all right.
I could be wrong. I believe we did remove that for that reason, that one, the CIP hadn't been completed at that point in time. And now that the initial phase has been completed, we're looking good for the foreseeable future. So that may become too, as we get closer to that time, as they talk about that debt cliff in 10 years, if we had to do something major, it might fit into that major drop off of debt. If we needed something, that's would be the theoretical goal, is to fit it in that when that huge debt drops off. But at this point in time, we don't believe we're going to need to do something that significant.
Any other questions? Comments? It's been very helpful. Thank you all very much.
Okay, I have to adjourn my meeting.
Yeah,
It
okay.
is 7:54, and I make a motion that we adjourn the water board portion of the joint meeting with the capital budget committee. Do I have a second?
You have a second, Steve. Aye.
All in favor, aye. Thank
Aye.
you, everybody. We just adjourned our meeting, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep. We're a little bit early, and I'm debating whether anybody from the school is going to show up or not on this pilot program. I did send them Susan's, I'm trying to remember the name of the thing, Novo, whatever it was. Anybody remember?
I can get
But
it.
so that they'd be informed. Susan would remember, but I think she's stopped her video.
I think I can pick it up in a second, Sam, if you want.
Okay,
You mean the Nearpod?
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is. Yep. Yep.
Nearpod?
yeah, but I would, I sent them a copy of Susan's email and asked them about how this would work or apply to what they're trying to do. Of course, I just sent it out and haven't heard anything yet.
And Brian also
Hoping that-
provided another option that would be worth pursuing.
Excuse me?
Brian Host sent out an email this morning in reply to Susan with some other suggestions that he has uncovered for the school committee. So I feel we've got a number of options that they still need to review.
Well, we're certainly trying to understand and accommodate them. At least I think so.
So just so everyone knows, I mean, SMART, which is what I sent around, is software that definitely already exists inside of our schools. Because I know we've got some smart boards, and you know, at least in the early generations of that technology, they were sort of closed systems. So it was, you know, their software running on their proprietary hardware. You know, with the move towards sort of open platforms, they've basically unbundled their software and made it available to run on other people's, you know, large touch screen panels, or also to run on, you know, other people's short throw projectors, such as the Epson. So Epson actually bundles SMART. But I think there, you know, to make a long story short, I think there are several of these sort of interactive classroom software players. And at this point, the software is largely unbundled from the hardware. And I think what's in front of us, you know, from the schools right now, you know, is really their hardware request.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for you to say something else.
No, I just, you know, I just want to be clear. I think what they're asking for is the hardware side of this. I think they've got software in mind or plan to pilot a few different versions of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm virtually certain we discussed that in one of our discussions with them about this pilot.
I mean, what concerns me is not necessarily the pilot program, but if they then want to pursue it for all their classrooms, it gets to be a very significant expense. So.
Right, and we don't have a plan in front of us for that, and
No.
and yet, as Ralph pointed out, you know, calling this a pilot suggests that, you know, if they liked it, that we're going to then proceed with a rollout, and I just don't think that's built in anywhere.
Yeah.
I missed the beginning of this conversation because I stepped away to go to the ladies' room. So did anybody talk about the Nearpod or no?
We were
Yes.
just briefly chatting, hoping the schools, you know, join us. But I guess the point I made, Susan, is that, you know, when I responded to your email and also sent the link to SMART, you know, which is sort of an alternative. I just wanted to clarify live that, you know, those are really the software side of the equation, and what the school has in front of us really are the hardware platforms that, you know, that they're focused on. I do recall we you know, in one of the conversations they mentioned they were going to pilot, you know, different software vendors as well.
Well, how does everybody feel about how much money we should allocate towards the school's pilot technology?
Do we want to wait a few more minutes for them to?
Yeah. Well,
Can we do minutes in the meantime, perhaps?
We want to start to deal with some of these other issues that we might go ahead and just get out of the way so we can get some recommendations.
Sam, we could do that, or maybe just approve minutes.
You know, I had sent around an updated capital request list last week. I hope you all got it and had a chance to look at it. If we did all those projects on there, we'd be spending about $3 million, and we'd have about 3 million. My figure of 3,984,000 was a little bit off by about $50,000, but that's not really a big deal. So it would leave us with about 900,000 in the capital stabilization fund. And I think that's accurate, although Don keeps changing things on me. And I think I sent you all the latest updated capital stabilization fund, which I just got today from Don.
So
So
Sam,
I'm-
the spreadsheet you're referring to is the fiscal 22 capital request from last Tuesday, March 30th.
The sheet I have is dated 3/31.
Huh.
I'd have to go back and look at my emails to see when I sent it to you, but I know I sent it out.
So I put some stuff on the share drive, under the 10-year plan.
You put stuff where, Michelle?
On the OneDrive, under the 10-year plan.
Oh, okay. Was that an updated 10-year plan?
I believe it was just the list that was talked about last week, the items that you were contemplating voting on,
Oh, okay.
that spreadsheet,
Yeah.
that I believe you had one, Mike had one, and Susan had one.
Well, why don't we start on at the bottom of the list? We'll leave the schools out and see if they show up or not. How does everybody feel about recreation? I've adjusted this for any CPC funding they may get.
So Sam, I'm looking at mine. It says that you have 13,000 for the Sawyer Street courts. You got 30,000 for the Milliken concession. You got 70,000 for the Beechwood courts, but that doesn't sound quite right. This is the one I've got in my hand right now. Is that
Okay.
wrong?
Yeah, I had 13,000 for the Sawyer Street courts, 30,000 for Milliken, and I had nothing for the Beechwood courts.
You had nothing. Okay. All right. So the one I'm looking at says 330, which is, I guess you got a 331 update then. Okay.
Yeah,
Now, Sam, are you talking about in the, what we're proposing to fund column, or the amount requested column?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at I take it back. You're right. The request has actually eliminated that Beechwood court. Yeah, right.
What document are we looking at specifically?
Well, it says on mine, it says capital budget 55, well, unfortunately it says FY20 requests, but it's really FY22 requests.
yeah,
And
it
mine
should.
says- yeah, and it says 3/30/2021 as the date of its issuance.
The one I have is 3/31/21.
Okay, that's a new one. Okay. I guess I didn't pick up the most recent one.
So maybe if someone has it accessible, they can share their screen so everyone can see exactly the
Well,
same.
I can't, if you can tell me how to do this. Oh, wait a minute, there's share screen.
Yep, hang on, let me give you access.
Okay, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, you should have it now.
Okay. Okay, now. You got to talk me through this, Michelle. How do I go to files?
Nope, just hit share screen down in the bottom.
Yeah,
And then you'll see your document should be somewhere around there. Just click on the document.
no, wait a minute.
Nope, wrong document. That's okay. So stop sharing and try again.
Okay,
So hit share screen
yeah,
and look for that document that you're referring to on
Look
your
for
screen.
Excel.
oh, in my computer then.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think Mike has the same one as well. Mike, do you have yours accessible by any chance? If I give you sharing ability?
Let's see if I can find it on mine. If Sam sent it out, I'm sure I can find
Okay,
it.
here, I've got it up on my computer now. Now, how do I get it to share?
Okay, so hit share screen and then click on that document.
Oh, okay. Share screen, wait a minute. Down at the bottom right, correct?
Yep, it should be green. Yep, and now
Share.
click on your document. Oh, okay, yep,
Okay,
there you are.
is that it?
I believe so. If you can scroll up so we can see the top. Great. Or you want to start at the bottom because schools aren't here?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I have. Can you all see that?
Yeah, yeah. Expand the screen so I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, now the Beechwood Courts, what I had that was 70,000 and CPC is funding it with 58,000. So that leaves 12,000 out there.
Okay.
So we could go ahead and fund that. The 30,000.
Sam, just before we leave that, so last week when we discussed this, the discussion was the CPC was not funding any part of Beechwood Courts. Are we certain this is correct?
This is the list I got from Russ Benetti.
Okay.
I asked him specifically what they were agreeing to fund it, and I
Okay.
can send that all to you if you want to see it. I've
I
saved,
did see it and I remember this being on it, so.
yeah. So I should really have 12,000 over proposed, I guess. And then the 30,000, I had that CPC was funding 15,000. And the original was 113,000. And why I came up with 30,000 is I felt that that was what they were, on second thought, requesting.
They reduced the size of the project, Sam, is a main reason. Michelle, is this the right number, the 30,000?
Yes, so this would be the difference. We don't even know if we need the whole 30,000.
Okay.
It's almost our safety net. So we may be turning this back.
Okay.
And then the 13,000 was 25,000, and they were getting 13,200 from CPC. And I just made it an even 13,000. Any questions?
No, it all seems straightforward to me, and CPC's done the heavy lift, and these projects have been right-sized, and it seems like I mean, just to me anyway, it seems like a relatively small ask relative to what's being done.
Yep. Next is the fire department.
Sam, do you want to vote some of these and put them to rest, or what's your thinking?
Well, I thought we could deal with, unless anybody comes up with an objection, try to deal with the whole list. And if there's an objection, I'll take something off the list. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so maybe before we leave rec, does anyone have any objections to any of these rec items?
Yeah, as we go through them.
No, we've discussed them all in detail already. Either we agree or don't agree, but we all understand what they are for sure. And obviously CPC has helped a lot here, so.
Yeah, does anybody disagree with doing any of these?
No.
Okay, let's move to fire. They have a pretty light year this year. Anybody have any questions on it?
Now, I guess that the chief came on last week and he was pretty convincing that he needed to get a 12-year-old, I guess, vehicle replaced with a hybrid. And so the only question was, would it be a hybrid? So I guess the answer is they've chosen a hybrid here. So that's it.
Police, we're really on their vehicle rotation program.
Right.
And I've put in 300,000 for roads.
Yeah, Sam, on roads,
What?
on roads, this has obviously been folded into capital budget, I guess, last year for the first time.
Yeah,
I think it's really important that we meet with DPW and actually understand the road plan for the year as opposed to just appropriating the money. I mean, I think we should appropriate the money, but also do that
we
meeting.
need a further meeting with them to
For
get
sure.
the detail on it.
Right. I mean, I think we're going to I don't want to speak for anyone else. I mean, it's obvious to me anyway that we need to appropriate the 300,000, but I don't think that means, we just send the money over without a discussion. I think we should know where it's going and what their priorities are.
We need to know what roads they're doing.
Right.
Well, we've asked them for the prioritization list, and so that just hasn't shown up yet. So,
Well, we can, I mean,
Sorry, there is a road plan I can share with you, and I think it goes 5 years out. So I'll upload it on the OneDrive and share the link to make sure you all receive it.
okay.
that would be great, Michelle.
Do we want to take a look at it now? If you can share your screen, Michelle, or do you guys want to just keep moving on the list?
So
I mean, if
if
you want to share
keep
the
moving
screen.
on, I'll see if I can get it.
Okay.
Well, I think we've pretty much got to go with their listing of what they want to do. We don't want to get into telling them which roads to do.
I'm not sure I agree with that, Sam. I really am beginning to question the idea that we should do an entire road from end to end, when in fact there are some areas where you could do maybe 500 yards or something like that and make the road decent rather than delay repair on many of the roads that need repair in just certain sections, as we all know. So I don't know what their plan is, but it would be nice to know what it was so we could at least talk a little bit about whether or not that seems to make sense as drivers or walkers in this town as to exactly how are we going to spend this money. So,
Okay,
well, it's a good conversation.
But I recall Brian making the point that they do need to group these roads together in order to take advantage of the multiple town vendor, that it's not easy for them to piecemeal different roads. When we spoke specifically about Atlantic Ave between Howard Gleason Road and Beach Street, he said, well, maybe we could group that in with Elm Street perhaps, but that the point was that he needed to group areas together. Now, that's just my memory of it. I don't know if anyone else remembers that too.
That's a good recollection. I don't remember that, but I would say that that would be a wise move in many cases where in fact you can significantly improve the actual roads by not necessarily doing the entire road. For example, Atlantic Ave was done to a large degree under the sewer project, so that all you're really talking about are those areas that weren't done under the sewer project. So, and those are the bad ones.
But that's for Brian.
well, does anybody want to act on this particular one or hold off on it?
I think we should appropriate the money. We should just have the conversation.
Right.
But we should get the information,
Yes.
okay?
And perhaps we can make a recommendation to Brian that in the next iteration, that some plan be put in place to put a high priority on really bad sections, even if they're not part of a group. Exceptions to the 5 or 20-year rotation. Is there a way to get something urgently done? How do we do that?
It makes sense in different words, Michael. Basically, if we're only going to just replace them every 20 years and never do sections, you're basically saying, our maintenance plan is actually capital replacement and no maintenance at all.
Good point.
Which gets us in trouble everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Okay, so
There's much more.
I agree with Brian Host that we should appropriate the money because we've made a commitment to that. But
Yeah.
I think we should get Brian engaged in a conversation about maintenance, particularly on areas of town where we know the roads really fail and need to be addressed now.
That makes sense.
Okay. I will follow up on them and see if I can make some progress.
Okay.
I didn't have anything for the skid steer.
Mhm.
It didn't seem like when they prioritized things, they didn't include the skid steer.
We paid for
We
that.
already bought that.
All paid for, right?
That was a question I had a few weeks ago, and that was the answer. It's done deal. We appropriated the money on FY 20.
21
21, yes, FY 21.
must have been. Okay. Well, I'm gonna.
And the skid steer is in Michelle's garage right now, right?
That's what I drove to get to lacrosse practice.
And then the rest of their list is their priority order.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of them.
I think we've made good decisions on all of them, including the salt shed and the bucket truck.
Yeah, I think the bucket truck in the long term is going to be a very good plus.
Right.
Because we'll use it for a lot more than the DPW.
Mm-hmm.
So
I hope so.
everybody's all set with DPW at this point?
Well, I got a question. You got a chipper in here, and the way they've cast this is they're going to buy a new chipper, and there was some question about whether they're keeping the old one. I gather they're getting rid of the old one. However, these chippers are exactly the same. They have the same capacity. They're 12-inch chippers, and they use them for 8-inch size logs. The current one apparently works fine. The question is, why are we replacing this one? There's been no argument about this thing not working acceptably.
I recall the conversation about why there were two, but I don't recall the rationale. But my memory, Ralph, is that the rationale made sense to me at that time, but that's the best I can say right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But I think it had to do with storm cleanup, being able to deploy a second one or a new one. I honestly just can't remember.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember something like that as well.
Yeah.
But you end up with another piece of equipment here, which when you already got one, I don't see this as being as important. It isn't even as important on their list as it turns out here. So I'm really questioning the chipper as it turns out.
Well, is it a deal breaker, Ralph? Would you vote against it?
Yeah, I might in this case. I think having been at all of a high percentage of the actual brush days, I see nothing wrong with the current chipper. It works just beautifully as it turns out. So I'm questioning this one. And I bring in pretty good size limbs and
Yeah.
has no trouble with them. So
I think it goes not so much to brush days, but clearing down trees around town.
yeah, understand.
Trees blocking the roads.
I understand.
Michelle, can you text Brian?
I just did. So we'll see what he says.
Okay.
Well, at this point, it's 3-1, right? You're against it, Ralph, correct?
Yeah, I am going to say I'm going to be against it. I think
Okay.
this is not good use of money. Right.
No. Stan, the two mowers,
Yeah.
Well, the justification for the slope mower was that we'd save 10,000 a year. Does anybody know that's true?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm taking their estimate on it.
That's a lot of money to spend for doing that. Is the 10,000 seems like a very high price. We must have a really good landscaper.
Would you vote against it?
Well, you know, it's just one more piece of equipment. We're adding equipment every year. Look at the number of pieces of equipment we're adding here. Bucket truck, slope mower, stand-up. Well, stand-up mower is a replacement, as I understand it. Chipper would be a duplicate. You know, John Deere skid steer was an additional thing. I mean, we're adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. Yeah, you got to say to yourself, what is the payback on doing all this stuff? And it's not clear to me. That's all.
The case,
10,000, it's a 5-year program, you know,
Yeah.
to pay it back.
That's right. If you believe the 10,000, a lot of people would not spend 10,000 on their landscaper in a summer. So that's a lot of money to spend for a couple of slopes. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I know I saw the numbers get thrown out, but where are they coming from?
my recollection here too was that it was a safety issue in not putting a flat ground mower on a slope, which creates hazards for the operator.
That's right. So what they have allegedly done is they've hired it outside. So they put aside every year $10,000 to have it done by a professional outside landscaper. That's what they've been doing.
Mhm.
If that's what they say. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But even that seems like a lot of money to have somebody do slopes for you. But anyway.
No, it is.
So, you know, I just don't, what bothers me is not so much that I really just want to object for the sake of objecting. I just don't feel that they were getting objective fact, which really bothers me when I look at a lot of this stuff and say, why are we doing this? Give me the details and give me the cost benefit. And I don't see it a lot of times here. So, and you know, even on the bucket truck, which I support, as I understand it, we don't have anybody who's electrically qualified to go up and do anything with the LED lights we've installed. In fact, we have a contractor doing that. And as far as I know, we have no intention now of hiring somebody with the electrical qualification to go up and do that. So that the secondary use of the bucket truck would clearly be replacing lights here and there, but we don't have enough of anything but, in fact, the street lights to replace. But anyhow, it's just, I'm not objecting. I'm just saying, you know, got to be absolutely high fidelity on the accuracy of what people say.
Well, my thought on the bucket truck was they were going out and renting a bucket truck.
Yeah, I don't have, yeah, no problem. I think,
I'll call it high wire work.
no, they're not going to do wire work. I can
No, but I'm just calling it high wire, Ralph.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's 30,000.
What else to call it?
It's 30,000. Was it? How high was it going? It wasn't going very high. It was a rather low.
Yeah.
bucket truck. Yeah.
Well, Christmas lights and tree trimming and things such as that, being able to reach up outside a building to get to an eave, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was worthwhile versus renting it.
No, I agree with that. I don't disagree. I think this is a good thing to do. If we would trim some of our trees and clean up a lot of the lower branches, I think that would make a lot of sense. So it just is not going to get used for a lot of other things as I see it.
No.
You just don't have the skills.
And clearly they need to do something with the salt shed.
Yeah.
I put that in at 425 because it looked like you could do it for less than the 500,000.
Yeah, you should be able to. I went back and I looked at the Redmond stuff we had gotten 4 years ago, and I looked at all of the state requirements. I can't calculate how we use as much salt and sand as we do every year. You just almost can't calculate it. And although there are some figures going back a couple of years, we don't have a lot of figures. I don't disagree. Maybe we ought to do it, but I just am, again, concerned we do not have adequate data to actually say what is the right size of the shed based on the fact, the amount of salt and sand we use, which seems to exceed state requirements or state numbers by huge amounts. I mean, just staggeringly, 2-3 times as much as what the state would actually say is normally used. So,
does it make sense to not recommend this pending receipt of some salt usage information?
I think it's fair.
To be able to
And
put
ask for
that
it.
together.
Yeah, I think the kinds of things that you need to actually come up with is what is the average, we asked for this before, what is the average of usage over the past 5 years, right? In tons, if you want to do it that way. What is the actual state number per, I guess they call it per lane, or not road, but lane of the roads. We got 100 total, we have 50 feet, 50 miles of roads in the town, and it translates to 100 total miles of lane requirements, times the state requirement of 300 tons per acre, hours per mile. I mean, there's a whole series of numbers you could put in and say, okay, how come those numbers don't match when we look at the actual usage? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying get the numbers. For heaven's sakes, we shouldn't be doing stuff like this unless we have adequate, well-defined numbers as to what is typical and what are we actually using based on what the state would indicate we should be using. Anyway, that's all. Just trying to get the data. I've asked for it before.
Well, do we want to hold off recommending this?
I think it would be, I wouldn't hold off. I'd say you're going to recommend it pending receipt of that data, in which case you at least have something to put put some fact around this.
But if we recommend it pending something, you know what's going to happen. It's
Oh,
just
You'll never get it.
ahead.
It's going to happen. Yeah, I know it. They're already clearing the area.
Yeah, but they could probably get through another year,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, it's not, we're almost through the salt season anyway.
Yeah, I hope we are. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all do.
Yeah.
I took out my snow stakes. We better be.
I think that Brian made a good case for the salt shed when he came before us. And it was not so much a lean snow year as we had this past winter and the winter before. It's those winters that were more typical and not extreme, but just typical, where the town was caught in a bind in
Yeah,
being able to get sufficient product to put on the roads. And Brian did speak to salt and the amount of salt that was required, that sand is the new pollutant, if I recall correctly. So salt seems to be the one element that we can use. And he did speak to solutions, meaning liquid treatments to minimize the accumulation of snow and ice. So my recollection on this whole discussion was a positive one. And those are some of the items that I recall as being convincing to me. So I would vote, if I could vote, I would vote for it.
okay.
Well, I'll just give you an idea why I'm so concerned. I'm looking at tons used in fiscal 15, fiscal 16, fiscal 17, and fiscal 18, right? In sand, in salt, we used 1,714, respectively 15, then 1,172 tons in fiscal 16, 1,383 in fiscal 17, and then, it's not a complete date yet, it's 1,250 in fiscal 18. Nothing in fiscal 19, nothing in fiscal 20, nothing in fiscal 20. So we don't have the numbers. And those numbers exceed by extraordinary amounts the amount of salt that the state recommends for this place. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying I'd like to know why, if in fact we're putting that much salt down and we're supposed to be using 300 pounds per mile, and we have 100 miles, and you calculated out how many tons that is, you can't come up with these numbers. Now, whether or not we're doing something different is the question. I'm not saying don't do this. I'm just saying that this is really requires someone to explain why are we succeeding to such a degree, 3 or 4 times what the state would actually recommend per mile. So.
Well, I'm going to get back to the question. Do we want to recommend this or not recommend it? I sort of hate to do it on a pending basis, because if we don't get the information, I think they'll do it anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So I would say we either recommend it or defer it for a year and have the town live with what we have.
Well, why not say we got a week and why don't they put the numbers together, Sam? It
Yeah,
doesn't take,
okay, well, we can try to do that, but
I mean, I can do it out of my head practically, you know?
they haven't been very responsive.
Well, that's not a good thing.
Well, we can leave off voting on that if you want until we get more information. Our problem is we're starting to run out of time.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to move on to facilities.
Let me ask one question. Is
Yeah.
there a consensus that we need to do a new salt shed and this is just a question of size? Or is this,
Well, we have to at some point. I mean, the roof is coming off.
right?
Some of the supports are starting to rot out. You know, it's probably not critical. We can patch the roof, I'm sure, for a lot less than $425,000.
Right.
But it's the size that Brian is trying to improve.
Well, yeah, they want to increase the size so that they don't get stuck in the middle of the winter having to try and get more salt when everybody else is trying to get more salt.
Right. And so the point is, if we agree that the roof is shot and we need to replace the shed, then we ought to be approving a new shed that is larger, that is sized correctly for the town's benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how.
I think that's the point, Michael, of the question, because if you look at Brian's email to us on the 22nd, he said, we currently have a 400-ton shed. He's willing to reduce what the original ask of the 3,000 ton down to 2,000 ton. But all the numbers that Ralph just quoted were in the 1,200 ton range for the entire season. So I guess my question is, why does our shed have to be what we need for a whole season instead of, can we just double the current shed we have now to an 800 ton shed or 1,000 ton shed?
I think the logic, Susan, was that if we had enough salt for the whole season, we wouldn't have to try to refill our salt supply halfway through the winter when everybody else was looking for salt and we couldn't get the salt. So we'd have enough to get through without having to replenish. I think that was the logic, but
Well, I get that logic, but I also recall we talked about being able to get it, but just having to pay more. So is that delta, you know, over the course of the useful life of the shed, worth going from a 400 ton shed to a 2,000 ton shed?
yeah, I don't know.
So all of these questions indicate that we should ask Brian to come back and.
Hey, Ralph.
Yes.
Ralph, the salt number that you gave in terms of usage, the 1,200, 1,400, whatever,
Sure.
in each of those years, is that just salt or is it salt plus sand?
No, that's purely salt. We're
Okay.
supposed to be reducing sand substantially, so I
Right.
use salt as the number, and also salt's what's really costing us the money.
Right, but I guess the reason I ask is that the size of the shed is driven by the salt plus sand mix. They're not just storing salt in there; they're storing sand in there too. They mix the two together.
Well, that's absolutely right. However, the amount of sand should be reduced dramatically from where we
Right.
are now. The state does not want us to use sand, so.
But I guess my point is that's probably what was driving the original 3,000 ton,
I think it was, yeah.
ask. He's probably thinking 12 to 1,400 tons of salt and, a similar amount of sand, and you're up well over 2,500, right?
That's where it came from. That's absolutely
And,
right.
and
That's
so,
right.
you know, and so it is the reduced mixture of reduced component of sand that's got him down to the 2,000 number. But he's obviously still leaving some room in there for a partial sand mix, which is probably true for the interim.
Yeah.
Um,
The argument though, Brian, is that I understand those numbers and I understand that's about right if you use the current usage, okay? So if you
Right.
say half of this is going to be sand, which is probably where you ought to be. So half of the amount of salt should be sand, roughly. You
right.
come up with 2,000, roughly in that order, right?
Okay.
The problem with it is those numbers are way, way higher than what the state recommends. The state says you're going to use 300 pounds per mile of they call it lane, or 100 for the town. It's 100 miles basically. If you count
300
the lanes.
pounds.
Hmm?
Okay.
So we have 50 miles of roads,
Yeah.
and those roads are mostly 2 lanes. So you've got really 100 miles of lane is how you look at this. And the
Yep.
state says 300 pounds per mile of lane. You can multiply all this out, and what I would do is I'd say on a single storm, you might actually have 3 different applications during a single storm. And then you might have 5 storms. You can multiply this out practically in your head, and you won't come up with these numbers, okay? You'll come up with half those numbers. So it's not only the numbers I would like to know, is how is it we are spending so much more than what the state recommends here? And this isn't just Redmond's old stuff. This is current state stuff, okay?
Right.
You know, I'm not trying to stop anything. I'm just trying to say, if we don't get much more sort of mathematically accurate stuff, it's very hard to say I trust what I'm hearing. Okay, that's all.
Yeah. Well,
How
30,000,
much did we save on the shed going from 3,000 to 2,000?
Well,
What-
it was at 500, so we reduced it by 75,000.
Okay,
But
so we lost
he-
1,000
But he's basing
tons.
that on the, well, I think he said he was going to base that on the canvas shed, which could go from 422 to 378,000, according to his memo.
So if we reduce the size of the shed by 1/3, we don't save very much money. Is that the net takeaway?
It appears so.
talking about a smaller shed, Brian?
Well, he went from a 3,000 ton shed to a 2,000 ton shed. And what I'm trying to understand is how much money do we save by losing 1,000 tons of capacity?
I bet you don't save
So-
very much.
So again, Brian, I'm just going off of his email.
Yep.
He said that if we were to go down from 3 to 2 on the canvas shed, you would go from 422,000 to 378. But we're carrying the number here at 425 in case they opted for the wooden shed, I guess. I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, where I'm going with this, I'm just trying to create a logical framework to work around the fact that we don't have good numbers on usage. And Ralph, you're spot on, right? But I guess what I'm thinking is we have to do a new shed, and you know, we can focus on size, but if we reduce the size by by 1/3, we only save $50,000. So I'm not sure that we should necessarily beat ourselves up trying to get a really sharp point on the exact size of the shed. But I do think this is almost more of an operating expense issue. I mean, where we just like spraying sand to and salt to excess and running up our operating expense, it kind of feels that way.
Yeah, that would be my major point, that I don't mind the 2,000 is like I was trying to figure it out. You're about a 30 by 30 shed or something. No, sorry, it's bigger than that. But anyway, like 45 by 45, I figured. That's a reasonable size. It's not outrageous. The president's shed is I guess at least 40 in one dimension, 20 in the other. So it won't be outrageous. But anyway, the point is that we ought to really understand, why are we spending so much more on salt and sand than in fact the state would generally recommend. That's all.
Right.
That's the point here. And they're just trying to force the issue on this thing to get some data in. That's all.
I'm happy to play it either way. It feels like we're going to need to do this, but whether or not you want to push for the data now, I'm okay with it either way.
I think if I can do this in my head practically, somebody should be able to do it in a week, right?
Yeah,
They should be able to, but the fact of the matter is they may not.
I,
And I think the only leverage we have is to say not recommend it until that information becomes available.
So
You know,
I was
to be-
sorry, I was just texting with Brian. He said he should be able to get in front of a computer within 10 or 15 minutes to add some color to this conversation.
Great,
So I don't know if you want to table that until he pops on.
sure.
Well,
that'd
we
be
can
helpful.
do that.
Maybe love it, sure, love it. Yep.
Well, and we'll hold that. Facilities truck, they're replacing, I think, a 12-year-old, which at some point they have to replace, so I look at it as it is what it is.
Yep. Yep. No problem with me.
And then we're into schools. And I don't know if anybody has any questions on the various items. I didn't move any money from on the access road or the sidewalk or the bus parking lot or the gym entrance, as I felt they hadn't solved the part of it was it was in the DPW paving program, but not yet. And as far as the curbs and sidewalks are concerned, they've got to solve the plowing destruction before they go and build a new one. I mean, you know, they'll put a new one in and then come plow the edge of it the next winter. That was my feeling. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I guess the argument that Brian made was he would use granite curbing. But even with granite curbing, if you drive up where now the cars turn around, you'll see that they have really wiped out the curb. It's unbelievable how much has been wiped out up there by plows. And you say to yourself, how are you going to assure us that in fact that's just not going to happen again? And I guess
better with no curb.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
There's nothing to destroy.
It'll just take the sidewalk out next. But anyway.
Wow. I don't know what the solution there is. The only thing I can think of, they've got to get a better handle on the plowing. I don't know how other people feel about not funding those last 4 items. No comments?
I mean, I'm in the same place, Sam. I don't think there's any well thought out plan or any discussion of other ways to do it. It's just like, oh, you know, we destroyed it, so let's replace it.
Yeah.
And the answer we got with regards to the patch on the drive just made no sense to me. It's impossible for me to process the idea that it costs half as much to hot patch an area around a single drain as it does to replace the entire driveway. That's just not possible.
Yeah. And it's something you could live with for another year anyway.
Right.
You know, none of this is it's cosmetic in some respects from the school standpoint.
And yeah, it ought to fit in the overall road program anyway, so that you know, what are the highest needs in the town and in order of priority. It really has to be. Yeah. So
that should be fit in with that, not
not separate. Yeah. You know, I wasn't facetious when I said we ought to have Riley Brothers come in and do some of this. If you've looked at any of the patches they have done when they've done their final work after all of these gas mains go in, that work is exquisite. You know, you look at it and you know it's 20-year work. Why can't we get anyone in who can do that kind of work in lots of the areas in town where you've got small problems, but not large road problems? It just seems to me there are plenty of ways where people have good small grinding equipment, good hot patch equipment, good rollers, and they just get this done beautifully. As you can see everywhere in the town where Riley Brothers has worked. Just, we don't seem to be able to find those solutions, which are the moderate and sensible
Right.
ones. Yeah.
So maybe, Ralph, that's another item to add to our discussion with DPW. And I got to be honest, I think we need to have Carl in the room. You know,
Yeah.
going through Brian is just not
Yeah.
getting us the answers that we need.
Yep. Yep. I think it's fair to ask those questions because there are solutions to getting the town to look a lot better, but for a lot less money as I see it. So
Totally agreed. I think we need to have a discussion around the sand. I think we have to have a discussion around, you know, patching as opposed to wholesale road replacement. And it's probably other stuff that.
yeah.
Well, do we want to deal with any of these school items on the proposed amount?
Well, why don't you just start at the top where they're almost a given you're going to do them. I mean, so
Well,
just,
the bus lease you got to do.
Yeah.
I think. Sprinkler heads,
yeah, of course you're going to do them.
safety issue.
Yeah.
The air handler
Yeah, you're going to do them.
and the HVAC system.
Yep.
Track replacement came down to 120. CPC is funding the rest. They can't, for some reason, they can't do the turf field. And it seems to be unclear to me, and I asked Russ Benetti, but he doesn't totally understand it, but that's not on their list of items that they can do. So I put the full amount in.
Okay.
Chromebook lease, woodshop dust.
And back on the turf replacement, what does that do to the bottom line in terms of how much out of capital stabilization would the schools then get with the 500,000 included? Is that $500,000 amount reflected all the way down at the bottom?
Yes.
And what I thought I saw was that we're very close to our $3 million pot of money with
Yeah.
that 500,000 in there.
Correct.
Right.
And the
And
schools are
plus-
seeing one, if I'm reading this correctly, Michael, the schools get 1/8 or getting 1/8 of that
$1.8 million.
out of the 3 million.
So they're getting 2/3 of it.
Ironically, it's almost, you know, spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's close to their normal percentage, right? Yeah.
We didn't approach it with that goal in mind. We're just doing, you know, needs and priorities, but that's where we landed. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I lowered the pilot program to 32,000. I figured they could do 2 classrooms and that would give them enough information to know what they should do. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
and
they have to do a classroom in each school.
Yeah. And you could look at it also, they could still do 4 classrooms. It drops it to 8,000 per classroom, which even if you count that times 100 classrooms is a lot of dough anyway. So
Yep.
you got a lot of flexibility even with 32,000. So
They should be able to figure it out.
I am still confused by this, especially in light of what Susan sent us this morning. And I'm confused by what Brian said later thereafter in this meeting.
okay, maybe I can help a little bit.
Are we looking at, are they piloting hardware plus software, or are they piloting just hardware? Because Susan's point was that there are solutions that are less expensive and more elegant than what they're proposing.
Okay, maybe I can help. Okay. When we were all in school, a teacher would stand up in front of a blackboard and, you know, write their stuff on the chalkboard and we would copy it. And occasionally they'd roll out an overhead projector and put, you know, slides up on the wall, right? or they'd roll in a projector and show a movie to the class on rare occasion. What's currently in our schools today, okay, in almost every room is both a projector hanging from the ceiling, okay, as well as, you know, a chalkboard, and in many cases an interactive whiteboard, okay, which basically, you know, digitally records what makes a digital record of what you're putting on, you know, on the board, so that, you know, students can basically just save that as their notes, or it creates a PDF effectively of their notes. The core of what they're proposing here, okay, is to take those two pieces of technology, the projector up on the ceiling, as well as the interactive whiteboard that's on the wall, and converge them into a single piece of equipment, okay, which basically not only creates an image on the wall, but allows you to mark it up, manipulate it, and make it completely interactive for kids even sitting at their seats to interact with it and manipulate it and mark it up. All right. And the answer is that it's a combination of hardware and software, but the core of this is, I mean, look, the core of the functionality is software, but the core of the platform on the wall, okay, is one of two things. It's either a giant touch screen flat panel TV, effectively, or monitor, or it's a short throw overhead projector, which mounts basically on the wall directly overhead, you know, directly above where you'd be marking up the board surface, and it projects the image onto the wall in a way that, you know, the image comes down between the person standing by the wall and the wall itself, so that there's, you know, they're not projecting the image onto the person, they're projecting the image onto the wall, and the person can mark up the image on the wall. And then there basically is a digital stylus and some sensors that are mounted on the wall and along the sides to track the digital stylus, and, you know, and make it interactive in that way. But those are fundamentally the two platforms that they want to, you know, to demo. There are a whole bunch of different types of software that you can run on those two platforms, but those two platforms are the fundamental core. It's either a big touchscreen flat panel, or it's a short throw projector that's mounted at the top of the wall, along with a digital stylus and some digital sensing equipment to make the image interactive, even though it's a projected image. All right. And that's the core of the cost. Those are, you know, those projectors with the Epson interactive projectors, I think were like, you know, $3,000, right? And the big touch screens are kind of in the similar price range. And then so that's the core of all of this. I mean, they definitely need to test a short throw interactive projector. They definitely need to touch, you know, great big touch screen TV, and they definitely need to test, you know, a couple of different software loads to see what actually works on those platforms and provides them the best functionality in their, you know, in their environment, right? But that only gets you up to, you know, a few $1,000s per room. Then you have to add on install costs, okay, which, you know, can be expensive in the public sector. But then they're also adding on some other stuff, right? Like these, you know, these Wi-Fi speakers with microphones in them and some other things that I'm less convinced of. I guess, you know, I'll pause there before I share my opinion on this stuff and just ask people if they understand what I just tried to describe.
Sure.
I understand it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I understand it.
What I'm trying to correlate is what Susan sent out to us.
That's just the software that would run on this program, on one of these platforms, and webcast it out to kids' PCs. It is not the hardware that would put this up on the wall at the front of a classroom.
So
Actually, Brian, that's not my understanding. My understanding is it uses the technologies, the hardware that you already have.
Right, exactly. It's the software that runs on the hardware platform, but you need a hardware platform at the front of the room.
Right, which it's kind of agnostic as to what that is.
Correct.
It doesn't have to be a really high, you know, functionality board because the software has that intelligence in it. So
In the end, I mean, there's no intelligence in the boards other than the ability to put an image on the wall and make it interactive, either by direct touch in the case of a flat panel screen, or through, you know, digital stylus tracking in the case of the interactive projector. But yeah, you're right, Susan. What you know, that solution is simply the software. It's not the hardware platform that goes up on the wall. And you can't, you know, you basically, I mean, the rubber meets the road with the hardware platform. You have to have one of those two platforms for any of this software to work. And right now, you know, we have first generation stuff where that platform, that hardware platform is approaching end of life, and it's actually two different platforms. And so the next step is not only to replace it, but to move to a converged platform, which both puts the image on the wall and provides the interactive capability. And you can do that with anyone's, you know, any number of software vendors. You do it with Smart, you can do it with, you know, the one that you sent over. But right now, I think, you know, the key issue is that our smart boards, which are first gen, are approaching end of life. Our overhead projectors, you know, which are not short throw, they're throw from halfway across the room, which puts the image on the teacher and not on the wall, you know, are also, I mean, they may still have life on them, but the bulbs do die in these things. And those things are, at least for educational purposes, obsolete. They're fine for showing movies, but they're not for, you know, they're not fine for sort of putting an interactive image on a wall. So, you know, the core of this is a few $1,000s to converge those two devices and replace them and put a next gen solution on the wall. And I, you know, my own personal feeling on this is that's where the focus should be, right? First, figure out which platform works. Is it touch or is it short throw projector? Get a view on that, test a bunch of different software loads, figure out which software you like best. You know, that's probably the second step. I mean, if the platform is junk, the software is not going to save it. So, you know, personally, I would go in that order. But certainly, once you have a good platform, the software, you know, you really need to pick the best software. And then, you know, with regards to these peripherals, I'm just totally unconvinced. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that, you know, this $2,000 per room for these, you know, what I'm going to call, you know, Bluetooth walkie-talkies. I mean, they're effectively speakers with a microphone, and they run on some form of wireless. I don't know if it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. I mean, are just tying into a teacher's, you know, headset effectively. I mean, there's no more technology in those things than in your typical wireless headset, right? There's a Wi-Fi chip, there's a wireless chip of some sort, there's a speaker, and there's a mic, right? It's not complicated. Yet somehow it's a $2,000 system per room for, you know, for half a dozen of these things. It also dawned on me that functionality exists in every Chromebook, right? I mean, we're doing this Zoom right now. We've got a mic, we've got a speaker, and we've got a Wi-Fi connection in front of every one of us right now, right? And so every one of these kids has this functionality on their desk in front of them, you know, all day, every day to insert, you know, to inject a whole new set of devices, you know, that just break out the audio function versus what's already on our Chromebooks or already on our iPhones. It just seems, I don't know, it seems both wasteful and technologically complicated. I mean, it's just one more thing that you have to get to work before you can teach. But those are my thoughts. I mean, in summary, I think Ralph's point is right. With $32,000, they certainly have enough money to do several classrooms focused on the absolute core of this technology. And it gives them some wiggle room to, I think, experiment with some of the other, you know, quote unquote, cool toys around the edge and decide whether or not they're really worth it.
We still haven't heard about the overhead, the infrastructure demand from these devices, and Ron Menard's input on this or his involvement in the piloting. Now,
He
I don't want to make the
wrote
assumption
us a
that it's
long
no.
memo on it.
What's that?
He wrote us a memo on it that I sent on to you all about the pilot program. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, that was the school IT position. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing anything about his participation as a stakeholder.
Yeah, you're right, Michael.
So I don't have a vote, but I am not in favor of this one, not as constituted.
Would you be not in favor of any support for the pilot program?
Not until it's been better presented. And I feel that we have been given short shrift by the school department. They had their presenter leave early before we finished all of our discussion or questions. They're just sort of saying, hey, this is what we want to do. Give us the money.
That's almost nothing new for the school department.
Well, now
Let's focus on the requests.
Yeah, you're right, Brian. I should shut my mouth.
I didn't say that, Sam.
Yeah, you can.
You know, my only other input on this is they've hired a person to bring, I guess, the schools into a new age in the use of technology. I don't think we can deny them money on this one, to be honest with you. Mike, I understand fully where you're coming from. I just think that they hired Lisa Radden for the purposes of trying to come up with something that would be, as Brian said, maybe more integrated, with fewer devices and so on. I don't think you can deny it to them right now. That would mean that Lisa would have little to do, to be honest with you. And it may be true that overhead projectors, the way they are now constituted, are old technology. They work quite well, as most of you have used in your experiences, and certainly I have in many locations. That's what most people still have everywhere. And they tie into your computer quite beautifully, and they work very well. But I guess we bought these things 5 or 6 years ago, and so they feel they can't keep up with them for whatever reason. I don't even see anywhere in the records where we actually authorized them, to be honest with you. But anyway, so I'm more in favor of at least the 32,000. And I guess echoing Brian, you want to fool around with some peripherals, fine, but that may well be the one thing that we'll absolutely put our foot down on. We're not going to have Bluetooth headphones out there for everybody. So
yeah,
They're speakers, actually, Ralph. They're little Bluetooth two-way speakers.
Is that what they
Speaker
are?
number.
Oh, of course, that's what you got on your computer already. So
Absolutely.
yeah, sure.
And on your phone.
And on your phone, that's right. Yep.
anything further?
No, I guess one other thought, there was no discussion about, whether or not any of this stuff could be accessed via demo. And, most vendors will provide you demo units of almost anything if they think they're going to get a 100 classroom sale in the end. So I do feel comfortable that, we shouldn't just be writing a check for the whole amount. I mean, they should be approaching vendors for demo units. They should be approaching software vendors for demo software packages. They may be able to get all this stuff for free, quite honestly. So I think this puts a little bit of pressure on them if they really feel strongly about, having to do every last bit and do this number of classrooms. I think it puts a fair amount of pressure on them to go actually ask for demo units.
Yeah.
So we need to convey that message, don't we? Rather than just leave it up to them to figure out.
I think we do need to convey that message. And I certainly Francine and I can convey that message as liaisons.
Okay. Sam, one bit of bookkeeping here. I believe we have 5 members on the call.
Yes.
your votes are 4-0 or 3-1.
Yeah, because you're not really supposed to vote if we have a full.
Oh, no, I'm 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can change that. That's not a bad thing. I was trying to get ahead of the game. I shouldn't have been trying to.
It happens.
How's that, Michael?
You got it. Unless you're a non-voting ex emeritus chair.
We have Brian Joyce waiting in the wings. Do we want to get him on so that we can ask all our questions that we previously asked?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Brian, are you there? There he is.
Hi, can you
Thank you
hear
for
me?
joining us. Number
Yeah,
one.
sorry. I was driving when I got the invite. So I don't know. It's pretty dark in here, but I'm looking at my computer, but technology wise, I'm on my phone. So
That's okay.
Call from Joyce Sheila.
Well, either Ralph or Brian, host, you want to go through what we're wrestling with?
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Okay.
Brian, what I'm wrestling with is the use of salt that we do in this town. And let me give you a couple of numbers. I'm looking right now at roadside salt use in Massachusetts, okay? And what I see is under Massachusetts DOT salt policy, salt or sodium chloride is applied at 240 pounds per lane mile. We have 100 lane miles approximately, and that's 50 times 2 in the town. And when you multiply that out, I had used 300 pounds to be generous, but anyway, you multiply that out, I cannot come up with the numbers of the amount of salt that we actually use, which if I average them out of the years that we have, I have 15 through 18, I would say the average is around 1,200 approximately tons of salt per year. So, and even when I said, okay, we might have 3 applications per storm and there were 5 storms, I mean, I'm just trying to multiply this out and say, why are we using so much? And in this study, which is coming from the National Research Council, it says Massachusetts tops the list of states with the highest road salt use at 19.94 tons per lane mile each year, surpassing even New York with 16.6 tons per lane mile. And then it says under Mass DOT salt policy, salt or sodium chloride is applied at 240 pounds per lane mile. In other words, the problem for me is not doing the salt shed. It really is, how come we seem to be using so much more than in fact the recommended amounts? And that's where it's coming from. I'm just trying to get everyone to focus on this whole question. Not to say we shouldn't have a 2,000 ton shed. It means that I want to know that makes sense based on the actual recommended usage. That's all. So.
sure. So I'm trying to find out. So there are 3 types of roads in our town that we treat and plow, and so it's the 50 miles you're referring to are both the public and the private roads, but there is a third one where almost 15% of the population lives on, and that's the shared common driveways.
Sure, I've got one. Sure, I understand that.
Yeah. So, and those add up to, let me see if I can get the number here, but it's not quite double, but it is, it's about, I want to say another third of those miles. So we're likely up around 75 miles. And I understand that those are not double lane miles, but it does add to the treatment. Also, we're doing a 50-50 mix, and we're ultimately going to be going away from the 50-50 being sand and salt, and we add a little bit more salt depending on the precipitation. If it's more ice, we're going to be going away from the sand, but that sand obviously doesn't have the melting capacity of the salt, so that we're actually, you know, per lane mile dropping half the amount of poundage of salt. It's actually a half mix, and we're treating a lot more miles than what is in our public and private road list.
Can you multiply it all out though and say, okay, it's based on, you know, you can use 240 pounds per lane mile, or you can use 300 pounds, whatever you want. But what does it happen when you multiply all that out in the number of times per storm that you use to actually apply it, and then the number of storms? I mean, just I'm trying to come up with some way to actually come up mathematically with how come we're using so much.
So I understand your question. I'm just trying to do some calcs here. I don't know if I'll be able to get the answer in the short amount of time we have here, but I think really it comes down to the amount of salt we use. What we're asking for is it's not equivalent to the amount of salt we use in a year. I think it's worthwhile to go through those, you know, how much we spread on the roads and how much we spread on the private drives as well. But I don't think we're gonna come to an amount where we're gonna look for a smaller shed.
I'm not even asking for that though. I'm just asking for just get the numbers in some, even if it's a larger than we need. Do we need to spend that much money on the salt and sand itself? In other words, why are we exceeding the normal state apparent numbers as to what we should be using? Are we doing it or are we not?
Can you still see me and hear me here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't have the answer offhand. I'm gonna have to do a little spreadsheet here, but I understand the question, and I don't, you know, if it affects the vote of the size of the shed, I guess. Hello.
We can see and hear you.
We can see you, right?
Okay. Sorry about that. I keep getting texts here. I'm sorry, I can't answer the question. You know, the specific question that you're asking, Ralph. I just will say that the size of the shed, again, I don't think we're going to reduce it based on the calculation or the answer that you're looking for. I think we use less salt than we should per lane mile based on the 50-50 mix that we put down. I think in the future we're going to be using more salt, potentially up to 100% mix based on the NIPD's permit. And our current salt shed in twice this year, we had precipitation, 3 storm events over about a week and a half time frame. And we got to the point where we were ordering salt and sand before we even took a scoop out of a full salt shed. So, you know, at the end of a week and a half, while we're waiting for deliveries, the guys are staring at the back wall of the salt shed and start rationing the salt. Again, I understand the calculation that you're looking for. Sorry, I can't do it right here. But 400 tons, if it's gone in a week and a half, is clearly not enough. And 2,000, just by virtue of knowing that we can run out in a week and a half, gives us 5 times that amount and enough lead time so that we can comfortably order salt as we're using it, not before we take a scoop out of the salt shed.
Brian, how quickly do you think that you can actually do this math and get it to us?
I think tomorrow, I just need to find the spreadsheet that has our public, private, and private drives and see if I can get a linear footage on those private drives.
Okay. And Ralph, the state and the SALT Association, studies that you're referencing, are they in a form where you can send them over to Brian so that he can see what you're referencing?
Yeah, if I don't know if you can give me the if you can give me the ability to show my screen, it's just very simple. It's a paragraph here from it says roadside salt use in Massachusetts, and it gives you all the numbers. Sure.
Thanks, Brian. I think it would be helpful to look at the reference so that we can make sure that we're comparing.
And we're trying to reconcile, so I think it'd be good for Brian to see the reference that you're making.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Let's see if I can.
Can you just email it to Brian?
Oh, of course. Of course.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably the best thing to do.
Now, do you want it right away, or do you want to wait on this? What do you want to do?
If you could email it to me now, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me get then the URL on this thing, okay? I'm going to give you the URL so it's very easy to get, okay? Let me copy that. Get onto my email here. Okay. Joyce. Paste.
So Brian, just while Ralph is doing that, let me just sort of give it a moment of perspective. I mean, I know you're focused on the shed. I think, what we're trying to convey is that we understand the need for the shed. We're actually focused on the usage for a moment, because sometimes when you dig into capital requests, you find sort of operating activities that are incurring excessive cost. And that's sort of something that's happened time and again. So when we look at capital requests, we look at the operating costs that are being driven by the operation as well. And, just nobody can make sense of the salt usage numbers that we're going through. It doesn't obviate the need for the shed, but it's raising a red flag that, are we over salting? Are we doing something fundamentally different that's driving up our operating expense lines here?
That's a different question.
Yeah,
it is a different question, but it's related.
It's related, but it's not.
Yeah. I mean, a perfect example, right? Once upon a time, we got requests for 3 new school buses one year. And what we realized when we actually dug into it is that we were spending 120 grand a year in maintenance on buses, right? We don't do that anymore. So this is just sort of analogous. It's not necessarily going to reach the same result, but I think people are perplexed by the amount of salt we're using.
Brian, do you see what I've sent it to you with a complete URL? I mean, you have to copy and paste that URL. Okay, that's a link.
Yeah, that just came in. So it just
I just copied the whole thing and then pasted it. Yeah, paste it into a browser, right? Yeah.
So it's Hold the Salt on the Road, that is Conservation Law Institute. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that's what it is. Let me look at mine and see what it says here. I'm not on the same page again. Well, it's National Research Council, blah, 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 right? Yeah. List of states with highest road salt use.
And Ralph, Massachusetts, what you said was just under 20 tons per road mile?
Yeah, we're doing 19.94, 20 tons per lane mile each year, surpassing New York at 16.6 tons per lane mile. And then it says the Mass DOT salt policy says salt or sodium chloride is applied at 240 pounds per lane mile. And then you can argue what are our lane miles. Maybe they're 125 lane miles. I'm not sure what they should be. And then you have to, of course, multiply by how often do you do it per storm, and how many storms are you talking about on average every year. So
Well, let me ask a wacky question. Maybe I'm missing something. If it's if Massachusetts average is just call it 20 tons per lane mile per year, and we've got 100 lane miles, that's 2,000 tons per year, which is above what our actual usage is.
Yeah, that's right.
So doesn't that
I'll
say
just
that our
do a
usage is
deeper
actually
dive.
below the Mass average?
We may be below the Massachusetts average, actually, and that based on that, right? Yep. That's all of that. It's not Cohasset. That's Massachusetts. So
Let Brian Joyce talk.
No, I'm just saying. I understand this website is it's an environmental website. You know, interested in its Conservation Law Foundation, interested in a lot of different environmental activities. And in this particular instance, it's on salt usage. So I'll need to, look into, do a deeper dive under the Mass DOT salt policy, and just verify some of these numbers with
sure. I think you should.
I mean, obviously every website's got a little slant, and that, this slant is, hold the salt. It's kind of a conserve the salt that goes on the road.
Brian, I have a question for you that's somewhat unrelated. What would happen if you didn't replace the salt shed this year, but we deferred it till next year?
We would likely lose the roof again on the. So what we did was we probably replaced 40% of the purlins on the roof, and we're just on another windstorm. It'll take off the rest of it. It's structurally. There's two main issues. It's very small and it's structurally deficient.
Falling apart. Yeah, I understand all that. So
I don't know
it's up to Mother Nature whether you make it through the year or not, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the roof, in my opinion, is well beyond its useful life, and another windstorm, it'll probably come off. So you saw pictures of the last blue sky day windstorm that took off a big gaping hole. And honestly, it was if we do have to go up there anytime soon, you're welcome to come up on the lift, and you can pull, any one of you can pull the roof off with your own bare hands. There's nothing really holding it there other than, No,
I understand all of that. I was just hypothesizing. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And if, I'm sure you guys go up and use the dump, you'll see that we're clearing it out. We're starting to grade it and make as big an area as we can to maximize the, the usage and the frontage on the new shed. And there was a question Michelle had asked about the ask. So in reducing the size of the shed, obviously there's some savings there, and the ask is, I don't know where the 800,000 came from. It's maximum it's 495, and then if we go with the shed that was cheaper, it's less than that.
We had 495, and then we had another figure of 425. I think that was for the canvas.
Yes, for the canvas arch.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation, Brian?
I think we're leaning towards the canvas arch. So MnDOT, Minnesota, has a lot of these structures, and they're pretty severe in their winters. It's all hot dip galvanized, and the steel is separated from the actual product of the salt with these interior kind of baffle walls. It's simple, and it's the problem with wood is that the connections, a lot of the truss systems you get, they're just kind of like stamped press plates, and after a while those press plates fall off. You'll find them in the salt pile, and this is just simple bolted. What you see is what you get, and it covers the salt. It's kind of what we need. And if it works in Minnesota, I don't see why it wouldn't work here. Oh.
Any other questions on the salt shed at this point? Thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate you scrambling to join us.
Yeah, I apologize for not having answers to some of those questions. I'll deep dive into that, the numbers on that website.
Okay.
DOT.
I'm sorry, before Brian hops off, do we want to ask him about the chipper?
Oh, yeah.
Are you want to buy a chipper, right?
Correct. Yeah, that was, I think that was prioritized as the lowest.
Are you
priority, but
replacing a chipper or is this an additional chipper?
it would be additional, and it would, the other ones had several breakdowns in the past year, and the age of it's just starting to show wear and tear and break down more often. So this would be a frontline chipper that we have of the same size, and the chipper that we have would be used on say brush days, or in major storm cleanups. We could have 2 chippers out on the road taking care of business.
Does that
How
help
was the other
with
chipper,
alcohol?
Brian?
Ralph, did you have any questions on?
Well, since I have been to many brush days, as you know, Brian, and I see the guys out on the road with the chipper mostly works fine. And we're just adding another chipper. Doesn't make sense. If you were replacing one, I understand it, but having 2 of them, I'm not sure we even have the crews capable of actually using 2 chippers simultaneously. So maybe we do, but I don't know that Andy thinks he does. But anyhow, the real question is whether we should have 2 chippers or whether we should just keep our present one, keep it maintained, or sell that one and buy a new one.
I would be in favor of selling the existing and buying a new one if that was, a condition of the vote. But, ideally, we'd like to have a frontline piece of equipment, no matter what it is, and then kind of a backup. We have a frontline piece of equipment for the loader is the one that loads the salt, and it goes out and does, road work at times. And the backup is the one we have at the RTF. So similarly, we like to have a backup piece of equipment that's used.
I understand. Although I understand your thinking on that, my own view has been, even when you bring the loader up, every time I go up to the dump and I see that Samsung loader sitting there rotting out, while you just put, people's steel or aluminum trash in, it seems incredible waste to have a backup piece of equipment of that value, $250,000 each time we buy one. It just sits up there rotting, just like the previous one sat up there rotting. I just don't see that anymore. I think we're just not being efficient or careful in the use of this equipment. I hate to be constantly critical, but I just look at this thing and I looked at the previous one. I even crawled underneath it to say, what is this leak from the hydraulic hose you're talking about? It bothers me to see this equipment go to waste, and having a second chipper sitting around just doing brush day seems to be a terrible waste of something that'll just rot out in time and be gone. I don't know. It's pardon my views on this, but I'd like to see us maintain our stuff better.
Right. So, I mean, the load is used for several things. It turns, the compost pile, which has gotten enormous. It turns over the compost and then exchanges it into the next pile. And a lot of times when it's not open, you'll see the loader working for a long time up there and doing activities like that. All the other spoil piles and the road tailing piles that are around the yard, it handles that equipment. The chipper, again, it's just, we have an older piece that breaks down, and this is a replacement unit for that. And for as long as we have the other unit, it would probably be a spare. Again, if we've been getting rid of pieces of equipment that are no longer useful or used in surplus, but I think chippers are one of those things that when you need them, everybody needs them. You can't rent them, and they're going to be fully utilized.
Okay, thank you.
How old's the old chipper and what's it worth?
I don't have a value on it. Michelle, do you have the request in front of you, the original request?
I don't. Let me see if I can pull it up.
I want to say 2004, but I don't trust, just going by my memory.
I think it says 2000.
Early
wood chip-
2000,
yeah.
sounds right.
It's 20 years old.
On the phone.
Probably not worth a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine we get a lot on surplus. To be honest, if it is working, and I'd prefer to keep it as a backup. Again, you know, when we get hit with those major storms and there are trees on several roads around, it comes in handy.
And it wouldn't be, the old chipper wouldn't be compatible for parts with the new one, would it? You don't know. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Just a thought.
It's a good chance it wouldn't be, Sam, just given 20 years difference.
Well,
I mean, even
that's sort of,
same
you know, when I really think about it, it's probably a stupid question.
No, I mean, I think it's a fair question. A lot of, Carl and he's a MacGyver up there. And if he has an older piece of equipment that he can cannibalize and keep something else alive for 20 years, he'll do it.
You'll keep it going for 100 years.
Yeah. The old Yankee mentality, right?
Can you send us a copy of your paving program? You know, what roads you're planning on doing and when?
I can. So we have a meeting, actually in the next 2 weeks. We're going with National Grid tomorrow morning, and then with our paver in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be updated. Can I send it to you after we update it?
It doesn't make any difference, whatever's easier.
Okay.
We just need to get some idea of what is being planned in the town.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously roads go up and down on the priority list based on utility and degradation, and some things, just pop one year when they weren't as bad the previous year. I think just thinking about the road plan, thinking it from a 30,000 foot level, we want to pave all of our streets every 20 years. And in today's dollars, that 1.5 to 2 miles of road roughly costs about $700,000. So we should be paving to keep up with that 20-year cycle about $700,000 a year. We get about $210,000 from the state through Chapter 90 money, and then Capital Budget Committee's been kicking in roughly $350 a year. So we've
300 is what we had, but
okay, 300. Yeah, I mean you've done 300, and you've done, sometimes you've done a special and an annual, which has been more than the 300. So we've been doing roughly the 1.5 miles each year. This past year, we only did the Common. We were intending to do Elm Street. That's a perfect example where the water main wasn't done, and we're going to do the water main and sewer main before doing that road. So again, I would just to keep, rather than kind of getting the nitty gritty and saying this road should be done over that road, I would just say we need to be funding 1.5 miles to 2 miles of road a year. And eventually you got to pay the piper when you have a deficit every year. And we say we're only funding 500 and we should be doing 700. you know, but maybe there's a capital project like Little Harbor that we were fortunate where we did all the roads in and around Little Harbor and along the coastline. So those are in decent shape. And that was all funded through that capital project of the water and sewer.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe paying the piper in 5 years or so, if we have a lot of roads that are very bad, maybe we float a bond for, you know, a few million and do a significant chunk of roads. But again, I think the strategy is try to do your 20 mile, get every road paved at least every 20 years. And then, you know, if you get that done, then you're in pretty decent shape.
Yeah.
And I should mention the selectmen, you know, they've been actively involved. We've updated the road regs. We now have a 10-year protection plan where it's a 5-year strict moratorium on doing any digging after we pave a road. And then from years 6 through 10, there's a you know, there's a fee that goes into a road fund. You know, where it's, if you want to open the street for a service, it's $5,000 in year 6, and then 4, 3, 2, 1. So after year 10, there's no protection on the road, but we try to, you know, inhibit any kind of cutting of the road in the first 10 years at least. And then the second 10 years, you're trying to plan, you know, where it's going to fit into the cycle.
I got you. Any other questions of Brian while we have him?
Well, just one comment and then one question. First, I think, Brian, we've spent a lot of time looking at the capital plan and the use of debt and bonding and the impact that has. And I think, you know, I just want to really relay this message to you because we're doing it to every other department. What people need to understand is that the debt gets paid out of the capital stabilization fund. So debt is not an incremental source of funds. It's simply a smoothing mechanism that ultimately gets paid out of the same capital fund as the cash projects. So, and if you were to, you know, just float a bond for a few $1 million to do roads in a given year, that would just simply be money that's not available to DPW and everybody else in the subsequent years. So I just ask you to recognize that. And that is why there's going to be an excruciating focus on paying for things with cash and not debt. You know, be happy to share the model with you, but the model using debt just doesn't work. So that's the comment. The question I had is, you know, before you joined, I think there's a real question about, you know, whether we should be doing more proactive sort of patching work in town as opposed to relying on wholesale road replacement as our maintenance strategy. There are, you know, certainly places, you know, in town that are in rough shape, but they don't merit replacing, you know, the entire road from end to end. I know Ralph is a big fan of the work of some of the contractors that he's seen do, you know, in town, come in after, you know, utilities tear up our roads, and feels that, you know, we should be doing that too, just as a town with regards to the rough sections in certain roads. So, you know, Ralph, do you want to, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share on that, or if Brian, you want to respond?
But only that there are ways of repairing portions of roads where it would be desirable not to have to do an entire road. For example, when you talked about the sewer project, the sewer project stopped at about on Atlantic Ave at Whitehead Road. And then from Whitehead Road to Margin Street, nothing has ever been done. So as a result, you have a stretch of maybe 300 yards, 400 yards, which is totally broken up and which causes people in a rainstorm to drive on the left-hand side of the street going north. You know, that is not a big stretch of road. You would never want to do the entire road because the road was only done 11 years ago or 12 years ago. But you should do that portion just from Margin Street on. Same thing applies to the causeway on Atlantic Ave, where the breakup there is almost as bad. You just say to yourself, these are places where we in fact did not actually have the fortunate experience of having the whole Little Harbor area done, but those areas now remain to be the isolated portions that were not done. It also applies to portions of Church Street as you come in from Situate, where in fact they're all broken up in that area as well. So I just look around town and I say to myself, there are a lot of these areas which are not a full road, but certainly could do with a decent, I mean, you actually have to bring a grinder in the way that the Riley brothers do, and hot tar and a good compactor and a roller, and you really do get excellent results as a result of those temporary, presumably temporary patches, which look like 20-year patches to me. So I'm just trying to come up with some other way to make sure that all of our roads are in decent shape, even if they're not fully repaved every 20 years. So that's all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So Margin Street is part of our Elm Street project, and there's a pretty good amount of I&I coming in the sewers along that stretch from Howard Gleason around the corner, and it is in terrible shape. But that is slated to be paved along with the Elm Street corridor when that gets done. The other sections, what we're trying to do when we pave roads, we're trying to get full sections from end to end, so that we're not leaving piecemeal sections that, like that Margin Street, like the Atlantic Ave Causeway, left out. But yeah, those do need addressing, and they're in a capital list in some way, shape, or form. Atlantic Ave, we're looking at maybe doing some water work on the older sections of Maine from Cunningham Bridge up to and through the Causeway. Again, that's kind of in preliminary discussion, but it's one of those things that will take care of the bad sections that are over there.
Make sure water replaces their pipes, because they put cast iron in.
Yeah. That's the one that keeps breaking right by your
corner
there. Yeah, by Sheldon.
Crazy. Well,
and just back to Brian's point,
the saltwater exposure from the marsh. It's simple.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
It's
Mike. Part of our discussions earlier tonight, when you were not on, was whether we should be including more money for maintenance on urgent repairs that are needed. I understand, we all understand how you need or want to try and include sections with full-on projects, but that doesn't really help the town when we've got really bad stretches of road that are waiting a year or two or longer to be repaired. So we're at 9:45 right now, and it's not the time to really get into a deep discussion, but I want you to be aware that part of our discussions tonight revolved around urgent road repair for short stretches of road and how to deal with that as maintenance, as opposed to the 20-year cycle of upkeep. So just FYI on that. And I would want to try and get into a longer discussion on that.
Anybody have anything else? I'd like to try to get an indication of, I've put in some potential votes here, and I have to go before the selectmen tomorrow night, and I know we're not finished, but I'd like to have some feeling as to how everybody feels about the spreadsheet in front of you now.
The only one, Sam, on the schools would be the door fobs. I mean, those are good. Not a lot of dough, but nevertheless, there's a fair amount of dough, 40,000 for those fobs. That would be the only question in my mind. I wouldn't vote against it, but you have to question, is that really a high priority? But anyway.
Which one was that, Ralph?
Yeah, it's door fobs. It was these doors actually out from, I think, from the gym out, to be honest with you. You already done a lot of these fobs already. So this was just a few, with 40,000 bucks for these fobs, which are to keep the kids from just, or at least even the teachers, from propping open the doors when they go out and do the athletic fields, as I understand it. I don't know. You know, it seems like a lot of dough for that, but anyway, I'm not sure that it's not so much a safety thing as it is a convenience thing. But anyway,
well, it's kind of a security thing, isn't it?
I don't think it is so much a security thing. I think they've sort of taken care of that. I think this is more convenience, but I could be wrong on that. I understand why they normally would be a security thing, but not where these are located. But anyway, that's that you have to ask somebody else. I'm not going to say no. I'm just saying that should be questioned. But anyway,
Yeah.
generally it probably is okay.
I've got you. Anybody have any other thoughts? Brian Host? Francine? Whoop,
No, I'm fine, Sam.
okay. Francine?
No, no, I'm good.
Susan?
No, I'm fine too.
We want to have a tentative vote on the spreadsheet?
Well, let me ask a question. Are we still 4-1 on the chipper? Or are we
Well,
resolved on that?
Well, of course, I'm the one. You got to ask me. If you're
Didn't want to
replacing
put you
it,
on the spot, Ralph.
yeah.
no big deal.
Well, you're the one.
As if I minded. My own view is that if you're replacing it because you got a problem and you can't continue to use the present one, I would say get rid of do not have a spare around. That'll just rot out, for heaven's sakes. You don't have the manpower to actually do a 2-chipper job out in the field right now. But anyway, the point is I would vote for it if in fact the other one was replaced and it needed replacing. So that's my view. 2 of them, I don't support having 2 of them around. That makes no sense to me at all. We've never needed 2 in our entire history in this town.
So Ralph, it's Michelle. From a surplus perspective, I can look in the morning and see what the town would receive in exchange for a chipper on the surplus market. So you have an idea of the trade value.
Okay, that'd be great. I appreciate that.
I'm guessing it's going to be a few thousand for a 20-year-old chipper.
Yeah,
Most likely.
it's probably not worth anything.
In which case, get rid of it.
Somebody buy it from you.
In which case, get rid of it and just have 1, but don't have 2. 2 makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I got you for Ralph.
Yep, right.
It's like the Humvees that sat up there forever.
Yep, that's right.
Does anybody feel that we should fund the gym entrance to the middle high school?
Where are we on our total? We're at
about $3 million.
we're right where we need to be. I mean,
Yeah, we're right where we are. I mean, but we could add that additional 60,000 in. That wouldn't really hurt anything. And the available of 3,984,000, I believe, is correct.
Sam, is anything else coming down the pike that we don't know about right now?
Boy, Ralph, not that I know of. I mean, we've got a bunch of stuff that'll be coming, but
What about the water
either have
department and
alternative funding, or it's not going to happen in fiscal year 22.
wouldn't the water department graduated charcoal installation count as something that was unforeseen and is now a reality?
Yeah, but
They haven't requested anything, but
yeah,
we
I
have
mean,
an overview on the whole town, and I would include that in the overview.
well, that's the worry of the water department, is that their rate increase doesn't pass. They're not going to be able to do a lot of things they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't disrupt this year.
Excuse me?
That shouldn't disrupt the rest of the capital requests this year,
Yeah.
if ever.
I mean, the worry on the water or sewer is that they run out of the ability to pay for what they have to do. In other words, they overspend. And I was a little bit concerned when it was either Lee or Jason, said that they'd be down to $15,000 in what was left over for fiscal year. But then they said, well, we have $1 million something in retained earnings, but you really don't want them spending that. They did that once and we ended up in a bailout situation.
Anyway, back to the school. You were asking about the gym. I mean, we're going to be below $1 million in the capital stabilization fund as it is, right? Because we're at 3.9 and change, and we've got 3 million worth of requests, which puts us below $1 million. So another 60, does put another dent in that. Is it a huge problem? No. Is it a higher priority than the classroom pilot? I don't know. I'd have to ask the school that. They've got it lower, right?
Well, we lowered it because we thought they didn't have to do 4 pilots.
No, I'm saying that I'm saying it's a lower priority. The gym entry is a lower priority than the pilots.
Well, I could make a very bad comment about why the pilot's where it is, but I'm not going to, because it's very much off color.
Okay, let's leave it there.
This is their priority list,
Right,
and I don't think we should fool with their priorities.
right.
My only question is, the gym entrance is something that has to be done. That's the whole uneven sidewalk mess.
No, this is a different animal, Sam. This is inside. This is to replace tiles and to put in cove molding and to paint the place.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't need to do that.
There are also other sources of funding to do it.
Excuse me?
There are also other sources of funding to do it. I mean, painting is painting, and replacing floor tiles. It's not a huge area. There's budget for that.
We'll leave it as it is then.
Sam, do you think we're going to get a request for that $200,000 for the school bus parking lot, though, ultimately out of all this?
They have no idea where they're going to put it yet.
Okay, but it could come back and haunt us in about a week, right?
The town will have to scramble and find a place to put the buses, which we've managed to do in the entire time that I've lived here. None of the lots have gone away. Just nobody wants them there, so they're playing hot potato.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that's some pie in the sky request in my mind.
Okay.
But Ralph, look, the reason that should wait, and frankly it needs to wait, is because anything could happen a year from now on this next bus lease. We could be going to a full outsourced model where the buses aren't even on site in Cohasset.
Yeah,
true.
Right. So why would we fund and build a lot right now if we don't even know where that program's going? The other possibility is that Alt Energy is pursuing a very sizable FEMA grant, sizable as in like several $1 million, for an installation of solar chargers and electric buses, and the electric buses would double as effectively mobile generator units or mobile battery packs, backup battery packs. Under the umbrella of resiliency for the town. And so that if that came through, that would bring with it a lot.
Yeah, and you'd have to figure out where you're going to put the buses so you could put the solar array in that would supply the electricity to charge them. I just think there are too many unknowns on it right now. I wouldn't fund it at all.
I'm not advocating, Sam. I'm not advocating. I'm just saying it's there, and would we ultimately end up having to pay it because we can't do anything else? And the answer seems to be, we'll find a way. We'll find a better way right now. So,
I think sometimes not paying any of this does force them to find better ways.
Yeah.
Anything else? Could I propose that we approve the various items that I've marked on the list? I'll take a second if anybody wants to give me one.
Do we
So,
have
I'm
a
happy
first?
to second it. I'm just, questioning sort of as a formality, this is the final vote. This is not an indicative vote. Is that correct, Sam?
Let's make it an indicative vote because I don't think we're finished yet.
Okay.
I just
Um,
want something for tomorrow night when I go in front of the selectmen to be able to say, here's what we're thinking.
Then on that basis, I'm happy to second it.
Excuse me?
On that basis, I'm happy to second it, an indicative vote on this list
Okay.
with the votes as shown.
Well, let's not vote on it then. Then we won't have a problem.
There you go.
It's probably the simplest thing. And finally, the last thing I have on the agenda is approval of minutes, because Susan,
Actually, Sam, just before we leave this, Michelle, when do our formal votes actually have to be, into the warrant for publishing?
So I was under the impression that they were looking for you to take formal votes this evening to present to the select board tomorrow evening.
Yeah.
that's what they'd like.
So as far as the last day of voting for the warrant, I think you're running up against that time. I think you may have 1 week left.
Right.
I don't know do you have another joint select board meeting to present to them?
No.
We'll have to squeeze ourselves in somewhere. I was just trying to look at when we,
Yeah. Is the select board planning to vote on these items tomorrow?
I believe that was the intent.
the select board will want to vote on this to make either recommend it or not recommend it.
Okay. And we're going to need to vote to not recommend certain items as well. Is that correct? We
Correct.
can't.
Well, no, because all I'm going to do is give them a list of what we're recommending. I'm not going to give them a list of things we're not recommending. I think that makes it easier for them and for the voting public, unless anybody thinks it should be done differently. I mean, what we've done in the past is give them only the requests that we're recommending.
Okay.
And I still haven't heard from Sewer. So I don't know if they have any capital items or not. I'm sure they do.
I guess my question is, I feel like we're down to like 1 or 2 items in terms of any ambiguity, right? I mean, it's really just the size of the school technology program at this point.
Right.
Is there any reason we wouldn't vote all these items formally?
We can.
Anyone else have thoughts on this?
No, we probably should vote them. I don't know that we'll be any different. I still may be a 5-1 because I won't have Michelle's answer, but a 4-1, but that doesn't bother me. So
Where are we on the salt shed?
I had we were recommending that.
Yeah, and what's the vote split that you've got?
What vote did I put? I haven't put a vote in yet.
Okay.
Is anybody opposed to the salt shed?
No, but I do want an answer on our salt usage. I mean, we just need to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And it may very well be that we're using less than the Massachusetts average, but we should know.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we can withhold the vote on it.
No, I mean, we should vote the shed, but we should absolutely hold Brian accountable to come back on the salt usage.
Okay. You want to make a motion then, Brian?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the motion is. I mean, do you want to go through these one at a time, or is the motion that I'm just trying to figure out what the motion is?
Well, can everybody read the request list I have on the screen?
yeah, let's see.
The trick is you can't see the whole thing.
Can you scroll?
No, I can't.
You have to scroll. Yeah.
We got to
can't,
scroll.
We can't do it, no,
Oh, you can't?
no.
When I scroll, does that help you?
Yeah, that works. You have to scroll for us.
Okay.
Right? Yep.
Well, here's the schools.
Okay, so I guess my question is my motion, do I go through these items one by one and what the vote is? And then we just vote the whole list that's what we voted on?
That's what, yeah, I would try to do the whole thing. And then record it as each individual item as a vote. Unless that seems not proper.
I think the only thing I would recommend, Sam, is that as soon as you get through, you send us a copy of this so that we can all say, yes, we looked at this in its entirety and we agree. And that's about all, because scanning through this, my eyes on a small screen don't pick it all up. But basically, I agree with just making a vote for the entire thing. But obviously, you ought to have this thing, formally at least sent to us. So this is exactly what we voted. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess my issue is, we didn't let's just say the school bus, for example, right? This says vote 5-0. I mean, we didn't actually vote 5-0, right? So how do we, I guess I could say we could have a vote on the overall thing and I could go through each line item and say it's 5-0. I don't know.
Well, we can take it individually. I just want to get it done one way or the other.
Shall we just power it through and do a roll call vote on each one of these?
Okay.
Let's just, okay. And they're not separate motions. Is that, well, I don't know, are they?
See, I was thinking if we made all one motion,
Yep,
seconded all one motion,
yep.
and then did a roll call vote, we'd get the thing done.
Can I make a recommendation?
Please.
Maybe it would be best to take them by groupings, such as schools, and then
Okay.
list all the school items, roll call vote, DPW, all the items, roll call vote. So now you have them in sections. It's more clear than saying all of these things at once. It's per department.
Yeah, but when you say school, all these things, right? I mean, there's more, all these things can mean a lot of things. We kind of have to read off the individual line items.
Oh, no. I'm suggesting you do read off the individual items.
Okay.
Go in groupings of schools first, DPW, then facilities, instead of the list as a total whole.
Okay, and I guess when we get to the individual roll call votes, the person could say aye with the exception of, line whatever, in which case I'm a nay on that one item.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That works.
All right, let's try that. All right. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the following items requested by the schools. A bus lease in the amount of $90,000. The Osgood sprinkler heads in the amount of $75,000. The Deer Hill School air handlers for $250,000. The Cohasset Middle High School HVAC system for $500,000. The track replacement for $120,000. The turf replacement for $500,000. Chromebook lease for $52,000. The woodshop dust collection system for $50,000. The pilot technology program for $32,000. The Cohasset Middle High School Science Lab plumbing for $120,000. The door FOBs for $40,000. And that's it.
For a total of,
For a total of,
$1,829,000.
yes, $1,829,000. Do I have a second?
second,
Okay, roll call vote. Sam, yes. Ralph?
aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Francine?
Aye.
Okay, that was 5-0.
Okay. Next, I move that we approve for the facilities department a new, why don't I just say a new pickup truck? How about that?
2021 Ram. That's all.
Okay. I move that on behalf of the facilities department, we approve a 2021 Ram in the amount of $59,000.
I'll second it. Roll call vote. Sam, yes. Ralph,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Francine,
Aye.
Susan.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're on to the DPW. And here, okay. So I hereby move that we approve requests from the DPW for the following items: a salt shed in the amount of $425,000, a bucket truck for $95,000, a slope mower for $48,000, $48,305, a stand-up mower in the amount of, hold on one second here. Let me pause this. I thought we had two stand-up mowers.
I only remember one.
It's not even big enough to be a capital request.
I
Yeah,
think there's
it
more
is.
than one. It's two.
I thought it was, yeah, I thought it was two, because it's not even big enough to be a capital request.
At
It is two.
8,000, at 8,000 each?
Yeah,
Yep, it's
So
two.
it's 16, should be 16, 17.
17,482.
Okay,
both places. It should be over in the, yeah, that column as well. Guess it's good thing we're going through this line by line. Okay, let me try this again. I move that we approve the following items requested by the DPW: a salt shed in the amount of $425,000, a bucket truck in the amount of $95,000, a slope mower in the amount of $48,305, two stand-up mowers totaling $17,484, and a chipper in the amount of $38,600, as well as roads in the amount of $300,000, for a total of $983,389.
I'll second it. Sam, yes. Ralph,
Exception for my vote, negative on the chipper.
okay, yep. Susan,
I didn't get 983,000.
well,
Uh-oh.
because you got to include the Ram truck in that,
Oh,
in
the Ram-
that total.
Well, we do? I thought that was
Yeah.
facilities.
It's,
Well, it is facilities, but when I totaled it, I included it with DPW.
Oh, but we voted that separately on the last.
we did
motion.
vote it separately, Sam, you're right.
Okay, all right, I'll correct it.
Okay, so I modified my motion.
Uh-huh.
It's gonna be
924, 380.
389.
Yeah, just make sure the total at the bottom picks up both facilities and DPW now.
Yeah, it should.
We need a 59,000 in that column in order for it to pick it up
Yeah.
at the bottom. Okay. So anyway, we've modified the motion. The new total is 920, whoop, Sam, you're hopping around on me, 924,389.
I'll second it. Sam, yes. Ralph, except for your
Yeah, with the exception, right? Yeah.
your chipper. Susan,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Francine.
Aye.
Okay, I move that we approve the police department requests for two SUVs totaling $122,500.
I'll second.
Sam, aye. Ralph,
Aye.
Susan,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Francine, no, well, Francine, you still have to vote.
Aye.
Okay,
All right. I move that on behalf of the fire department, we approve requests for engine 2 repair in the amount of 25,000, rescue jack equipment in the amount of 17,000, a new command vehicle, which would be a hybrid, in the amount of $44,575 for a total of $86,575.
we have
I'll
a second?
I'll second, sure.
Thank you. Okay, all those in, Sam, yes. Ralph,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Francine,
Aye.
Okay. I move that on behalf of the Recreation Department, we approve the following requests. Sawyer Street Courts in the amount of 13,000. The Milliken Concession Stand in the amount of 30,000. The Beechwood Courts in the amount of 12,000 for a total recreational department approvals of $55,000.
I'll second it. Vote, Sam, yes. Ralph,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Francine.
Yes.
So that should give us a spending of about $3,076,464 out of an available funding of $3,984,000.
Which leaves us with 910,
Yeah,
908 actually, but
well, 900 and change.
yeah, about as
Um,
low as we want to go, Sam.
Now, has anybody had a chance to read minutes?
Yes, I've read them all.
Is there anybody who feels they haven't had the chance to read them all? I don't think we have the 22nd and 29th available yet. Is that correct, Susan?
Trying to remember the ones I was working on today. I'm sorry, guys. I had my vaccination today, so I'm a little tired.
That's okay. You mean you're getting diseased?
No, I got my vaccine.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. You're getting diseased.
Oh,
No, you
disease.
don't.
Yeah, I was working on the 3-8 ones today, so
So
prior
you
to that.
turned out 2-8 and 3-1. Is that correct?
Sam, off the top of my head, I don't remember, but one of those dates we didn't have a meeting. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. Two, 8, and 3-1.
Okay,
The others we've done.
you want me to move the minutes of February 8th, 2021, Sam?
Sure.
Okay, you so moved.
I'll second.
Second.
I'll second.
Any objections to it?
No.
All those in favor, we got to do this by a roll call. It's kind of a pain, but Sam, yes. Ralph,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes,
Brian,
Yes.
Francine,
Can I just add, what date were those that we're approving? Because I wasn't at all the meetings, so I'm just,
February 8th. I can tell you whether you were there or not.
because I don't have the
Just take a
February
quick
8th.
look.
in-
Yeah, you were.
Okay. I don't have them in front of me, honestly.
So you're abstaining.
I'm abstaining, yes.
Okay. And then the minutes of March 1st, but Susan had sent out an amendment. So I don't know if you all had a chance to see that or not.
Yeah, I did.
Yes, I did.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
Ralph,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Susan,
yes,
Sam, yes, Francine,
Yes.
okay. Those have all been approved. So unless anybody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Because I know Michelle wants to get to bed.
So moved.
Okay. I'll move that to adjourn the meeting.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Ralph,
Yeah, I,
Brian,
Aye.
Susan,
aye.
Francine,
Aye.
Sam, aye. And thank you all very much. I appreciate your putting up with all this craziness.
Sam, do we have a meeting next Monday?
Probably,
Okay,
not
thanks.
sure yet.
Okay, now I'll keep it open.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
keep Mondays open for a couple of weeks
Very good.
till we get to the point where we know we don't need any more.
You got it. When is town meeting?
Town meeting is
May 24th.
May
Thank you.
24th.
24th, okay.
Yeah, and we haven't, the warrant goes to the printer April 23rd, so we have a couple of weeks if we need it. Hopefully we won't, but who knows?
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
good
Good
night.
Good night.
Night all.
Good night. Hope you all make it to bed. Good night, Michelle. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Sam.
you, Michelle.
Val. Good night, Brian.